Open up your eyes. Power, we stand and fight together. Power when we organize. Power, we stand and fight together. There's power when we organize. Power, when we stand and fight together. There is power when we organize.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises.
For Workers Independent News, I'm Joanne Powers. In a big win for workers on Wednesday, the New York City Council voted to enact the Car Wash Accountability Act. The act seeks to address abuses that hurt consumers and the low-wage, mostly immigrant car wash workers. David Mertz, New York City Director of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union.
You had workers working 60, 70 hours a week or more, wouldn't be getting paid overtime. Some of them wouldn't even be getting paid a legal minimum wage at all, working with harsh chemicals during the hottest days of the year, the coldest days of the year. Wage theft, a lot of them reported having their tips stolen.
In order to obtain a license, car wash owners must show they are meeting all applicable environmental and labor standards. The law also requires owners to obtain a surety bond.
We've had situations where workers won substantial wage theft judgments and then were never able to collect on those judgments. The owners just split. They shuffled corporation papers, were able to get away from actually being held responsible for paying those judgments. And the surety bond will make sure that that no longer can occur.
Will the Trans-Pacific Partnership be a trade deal or a raw deal? With the U.S. Congress expected to vote this Friday on fast-tracking the TPP, leading dissidents in Vietnam's underground labor movement want members of Congress to know that a TPP which leaves Vietnamese workers exploited is also bad for American workers. Until the Vietnamese government ends systematic labor rights violations, including unsafe working conditions, poverty wages, and widespread repression of labor activists, the workers are calling on the U.S. Congress to vote no. Democrats say the future of fast-track trade authority also hinges on a bill which would provide assistance to workers who lose their jobs as a result of the TPP. The House bill would fund this through tax enforcement, rather than cuts to Medicaid included in the Senate version. On Tuesday, the National Labor Relations Board sided with workers at the Terex Manufacturing Company in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. After painters at the plant voted overwhelmingly to unionize, the company started committing various violations to prevent assembly workers from doing the same. International Brotherhood of Boilermakers Industrial Sector Executive Director Tyler Brown.
Having captive audience meetings. The plant manager threatened to close the plant, said he had closed a lot of other union plants. Those are all violations of the National Labor Relations Act.
The NLRB issued a rare Gissel bargaining order requiring the company to negotiate with the Boilermakers Union as the workers' exclusive bargaining representative.
Basically, the board issues a Gissel bargaining order when they feel like the employer's unfair labor practices are so egregious, the results of having a fair rerun election just don't exist.
13 workers, almost a third of the unit, were also fired for organizing activities. The NLRB required Terex to reinstate the workers to their jobs, pay full back pay, and interest.
For many years now, labor law has been significantly tilted in favor of employers. It's kind of nice to see a government agency such as the National Labor Relations Board fighting for and seeking justice on behalf of these workers.
This newscast made possible in part through underwriting support from AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, and from the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rock on. Oh, and this time is my time. Alright, love or hate, it don't matter. So I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. I guess the only thing we're really going to be talking about today is victory. It appears victory is at hand. All of the work that folks have been doing over the last several years on the TPP front, it appears it's paid off. 302 people said no to the trade adjustment assistance, which is part of this whole negotiations. Now, understand the trick behind this, and I don't think it's over yet. There'll be another vote, trust me. And that's what we'll be talking about today, where things go from this point forward. Because trust me, something that the wealth class of this country and of the globe have wanted, I don't know, for the last 8-10 years, not going away this easily. But today, just before we came on air, the big news in the House, 126 to 302 on the trade adjustment assistance. Now, let me explain a little bit about what that is. The Democrats, they understand there are going to be job losses. And to make those job losses more palatable for their constituents, you and me, the people who are going to be unemployed and then looking for other jobs, they say, we'll give you some job training, help you go back to school, help you get a different job, a better job, one that pays a lot less, but you can be somewhat happy with, that will give you a shirt and a tie. That seems to be the thing. That's what the Democrats say. They will give you a little money to do that. Republicans, they don't give rats behind. Tough luck, buddy, seems to be their point of view on this, and they didn't want any of the trade adjustment assistance. And to prove that they didn't want the trade adjustment assistance to pass, they decided that the best way to get Republicans to vote for it, and this is the beautiful part in all of this, because it really makes almost no sense to me on any level whatsoever. The Republicans decided to say that we can tie the costs of the trade adjustment assistance, we can tie that into Medicare. So we'll pay for the trade adjustment assistance, all you folks who are going to lose your jobs and lose your income and then have to go through training and to get a lower paying job, and all of the negatives that come along that. We're going to pay for it by taking money from Medicare. Which, I got to be honest, there's part of me that goes, I don't know what the Republicans were thinking. I think they thought they'd be able to hold the Democrats hostage in that they could cut Medicare like they really want to do and they're ideologically right in line with, and hold the Democrats hostage without realizing that their own members were going, wait a second, this trade deal not very popular with my constituents, and cutting Medicare not very popular with my constituents. One sin I can be forgiven for, two, not so much. Or as my grandfather always said, if you're going to break the law, only break one law at a time. You never want to break two, because you might be able to talk yourself out of one of them. And this must be what the Republicans were thinking, because a large number of Republicans jumped ship and voted against the trade adjustment assistance, even with the sweetener, knowing that this was going to kill the fast track authority. And I got to be honest, I'm okay with this. I am, because, I had planned on coming in today and talking about the trade adjustment assistance and how the spin meisters like to spin it. And, I came across this Politico article this morning that, it was beautiful. I mean, it was well written. It was a nice analysis of why it's important. And they pointed out this guy, Michael Smith, who evidently had worked at the Sparrows Point Bethlehem steel plant there in Maryland. I guess back in 2012 is when they finally shut it down, demolished it, and all of that, because they wanted the new economy. But they're using this guy, Michael Smith, who then went on to go get a bachelor's degree at, I believe it was Morgan State University. He's got a psychology degree. And, he's saying, the program's great. I love it. And I would have never been able to go on to college and pay $30,000 to get a degree and all this stuff. It's fantastic. Only problem, he points out, is that, he's running up against his graduation date and the money's ending. And guess what? There's no job. I mean, that's the thing that gets me. He was making, 19 something an hour at the steel plant with health care, with a pension. Let me let you in a little secret. He's not going to make $19 an hour working with a degree in psychology. And this is the thing that gets me about our trade agreements. Look, I'm all in favor of this idea of a new economy. I'm all in favor of progress and trade. I love the idea of trading things. Used to do it all the time when I was a kid. But it's this idea of lopsided trade where the corporatists and the powers have all the control, and the workers on all sides of the borders, they're the ones who are screwed and then having to beg for scraps like this trade adjustment assistance. It doesn't make an awful lot of sense to me when you're saying that we're going to give away our manufacturing capacity and, all the other things that possibly could come. Think of all of the computer things that we're doing today that could be done from anywhere, could be done from a closet in Bangladesh. And yet we're still going to pay those same costs. And what's frustrating to me is how many new economies are we going to have? How often are we going to buy this frame? My entire working life, and even before I was working, we kept hearing about, the new economy. During the Reagan years, it was the service-based economy. We got to get away from that dirty manufacturing. So what we did, we decided as a nation, you know what? We don't want to breathe bad air anymore. We'll just outsource all those jobs overseas instead of cleaning them up. And this is the thing that drives me insane. Instead of cleaning things up, what we did is we just outsourced it, thinking that, hey, it's way over there. It's not going to bother us. Ask the people in California and Oregon and Washington what the smog and what the pollution from China coming around the world to them is like. Because after all, we do live on one planet. And I just find it interesting that we keep being sold and have the same bad message repackaged and rebranded and resold to us. And we just don't seem to get it, except today. I got to be honest. I did not expect this kind of overwhelming opposition. And it's my view, and we'll talk to a number of people today about this. It's my view, when you tied Medicare to this, it was the poison pill that they didn't realize was a poison pill. Because the Democrats, again, I would argue the Democrats, much like the Republicans, break one law, commit one cardinal sin, just don't do two. Screw the workers out of their jobs, but don't take their Medicare. So this is, I think, a really important day. To me, it shows that activism works. It shows that, calling your representative and hounding them and beating them senseless, it works. So I'm thrilled. Now, I don't see it ending. Again, like I said, there's just no way they're going to let this die. What happens later today, I understand Boehner has asked and is pursuing another vote. Do they strip out the Medicare portion of it? And then does it sail right through? Those are some other questions we've got to figure out. Because, look, the president did a ton of arm twisting. And this is a great part of this. I can't tell you how many tweets and comments I've seen from conservatives saying how much they now love Nancy Pelosi. I mean, yeah. Where was Nancy with the once you find out what's in it, you'll love it quote? I just find it really amazing. The conservative cats saying how much they love Nancy and how much they abhor, Obama trade now. So this is good stuff for me. And today we'll talk about that and a couple other things, but going to stick with the fast track and the where we go from here. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Celeste Drake from the AFL-CIO. Stick around. Right back after this.
Now who'd have thought that after all, something as simple as rock and roll would save us all? Now who'd have thought that after all, it was rock and roll?
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. In 1981, the Los Angeles Dodgers dropped the first two games of the World Series to their rivals, the New York Yankees. The Dodgers would come roaring back, sweeping the next 4 games. and so closed the curtain on one of the strangest seasons in baseball history. The strangeness of the season began on this day in labor history. This was the first day of a strike that would last until August 9th. Nearly a third of all games were canceled. The reason for the strike was free agency. The players had won the right to become free agents a year after their contracts ended. Before this change, owners could renew players' contracts year after year, effectively stopping players from testing their market value with other teams. Determined to reverse the gains won by the players' union, owners brought in Roy Graby as a negotiator. Graby had a tough reputation for representing management for General Electric and for Pan American World Airlines. He took that same hard-nosed approach to the baseball bargaining table. The owners wanted the right to receive a player of comparable value for any player lost to free agency. This would effectively discourage teams from signing free agents if they had to give up another valuable player in return. The players' union understood this was a tactic to undermine free agency. Many also saw it as an attempt to break the players' union. Sports Illustrated magazine declared it the walkout owners provoked. Finally, the two sides agreed to a compromise that kept the practice of free agency intact. In a controversial decision, baseball owners decided to split the season into two. The teams with the best records from each half of the strike-divided season went to the playoffs. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Kerr. After video surfaced showing a white police officer in McKinney, Texas, brutally detaining and pulling a gun on black teenagers following a pool party, many Fox News figures rushed to defend the officer. On his radio show, Fox News' Hannity clashed with an African-American caller when Hannity insisted that police officers do not target the black community.
You will never understand what it means to be black in America. You will never understand how we're policed and how you're policed. You'll never understand that. So we'll never come to an agreement on that. All I'm asking you as a decent...
But I can tell you one thing, and I can tell you a fact. That if you don't do things that are wrong, if you're not part of a gang, you're not robbing, you're not stealing, you're not selling drugs, you're not using drugs, you're not violent, you're not involved in any trouble, guess what's going to happen? Nothing. Stay out of trouble.
For more on this and other stories, visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
I will oppose the Colombia Free Trade Agreement. I want Congress to pass a set of trade deals. Send a message to Congress to come to an agreement on trade deals.
'Cause they're selling make-believe and we don't buy that here. 'Cause in the real world they're shutting Detroit down.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Well, I got to tell you, big news. I mean, thrilled, good stuff. I got to tell you, I didn't think it was going to happen. Down 126 to 302. Now the question, where does this all go from here? Now that we've had this vote, that the administration is a little spanked, as I'm thrilled that they are. And look, I voted for President Obama twice. Don't want to see him fail. I'm not one of those folks, but this was a bad idea. It was a bad idea during the Bush years, and it's a bad idea now. Anyway, here to talk about today's victory, I've asked Celeste Drake. She's the Trade and Globalization Policy Specialist over at the AFL-CIO. Celeste, thanks for taking time for us.
Of course. Glad to be here.
So I look at this, and I think this is an opportunity for people who have been working on this for years the grassroots activists, the people who've been making the phone calls and writing the letters and doing the op-eds and all of that stuff, to kind of, you sit back and go, you know what, our work paid off.
Absolutely, our work paid off, and it really is a time for folks to be proud of the work they've done. It's been incredible. 6 months ago, 12 months ago, folks did not think that we would be here. That in January, the talk was fast track would be through Congress before the end of February, and here we are, June 12th. But I would also say it's not a time for anyone to spike the football or sit on their laurels. Or the hard work, if you can believe it or not, actually begins today, because we've got a long road ahead of us.
No, as I said at the beginning of the program, look, this is a victory, but they didn't work on this 8 years to go, oh darn, we lost, and go home.
Right, that's exactly right. And I think what we saw from today's vote is that the current model of trade deals and how you get to trade deals, fast track, isn't acceptable. And, the votes were a little convoluted and other things. But in other words, working people and our allies from every movement, the environmental movement, small businesses, the consumer movement, faith groups, human rights groups, came together and said, we've got to do this differently. We've got to open up the process and have a different conversation. And today's vote was really an opportunity to say, we want to have that conversation. We want to open up this process, and the way it's been done before isn't good enough. And frankly, we want the president and the Democratic Party and the Republican Party to be partners in opening up that conversation.
I'm with you. And look, it's not that I'm anti-trade. And, I read an op-ed today from Caroline Kennedy that, I'm going, really? We're going to trot out, JFK was in favor of trade. Why don't we just get Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy's thoughts on it too? Because these are completely different worlds in my view. I have no idea why the White House would be that desperate to go, well, JFK would have been for it. No, he wouldn't have. I guess he would have had as much chance to read it as we do.
Well, the question is, would JFK have been for private corporate tribunals? Would JFK have been for, some of the intellectual property provisions that give big pharma excessive patent measures? But the real question is sort of that, whatever or not JFK would have been for, these are the things that we know are part of modern trade agreements. And so part of today's vote is like, let's have a conversation about if those things are really a good idea. Like, do we need to just shove every trade agreement full of corporate goodies that in any other situation would sort of be denounced as earmarks or crony capitalism or something like that, and then, give Congress only one choice, well, vote it up or down, even though there's some things you don't like? We think if you open up the negotiating process, you probably won't have a trade deal filled up with all these negative things like a corporate Christmas tree. And we can do better, and I think we can all get there if the rhetoric is toned down a little bit and people just sit down and talk to each other. And I think right now, unfortunately, the sort of economic elite, the corporate class in America has been so used to getting its way on trade policy, sort of regardless of who's in charge of Congress or who's in charge of the executive branch. They've had it their way, and folks across the country, in both parties, unaligned, workers represented by unions, non-represented workers are coming together and saying, no more, we've got to change this. And that's really what we want to do, is start this conversation over about how do we use trade to raise wages, to raise environmental standards, to protect labor rights, promote collective bargaining so that more workers can have unions, not fewer. That's the kind of conversation that we really want to have.
Do you think this vote on the TAA, because what stopped this, and as people I'm sure already know by now, it was the TAA vote, the Trade Adjustment Assistance vote, where Republicans thought it was a great idea to tie Medicare to it. That's what went down. The Trade Promotion Authority passed by 219 to 211, as I understand. So this was, in my view, won a referendum on the trade adjustment assistance and, the Medicare cuts. As I said at the beginning, my grandfather always said, if you're going to break the law, break one law at a time, not two, because you might be able to talk your way out of one. This could be, legislators going, hey, I can screw my constituents once, but not twice in the same vote.
Well, a bit of the Congress already got that the Medicare pay for TAA was a problem. And though, they also, the Republican leadership was trying to jump through hoops by sort of amending the fast track TAA package without amending it. And so they put a different pay for in a different bill, and they added trade negotiating objectives yet in a different bill. So there are many in Congress who sort of view the Medicare problem as already having been fixed. And so I think, part of the vote today was not just on whether the Medicare pay for was a problem, although that, it still remained in that particular version of the bill, but it was also that the whole TAA package was inadequate. It was ill-funded. It should have been at least $575 million per year as a minimum amount. And it should have included public sector workers. And those things weren't in there, so the TAA package was inadequate. And then I think part of the vote as well was, wait a minute, we all support TAA. We support workers. There ought to be assistance for workers who are displaced due to trade through no fault of their own. But they were uncomfortable with the quid pro quo. In other words, even the best TAA, many members said in their floor speeches, it's not a trade-off. I'm not going to say, I think Charlie Rangel put it best when he said, you can have a piece of chocolate and it sure tastes good, but if there's some poison in it, like this bad fast track bill, then you can't just say, well, I'm for the chocolate. You have to recognize that it's paired with something awful. So there's a lot of things went into that anti-TAA vote, including on the Republican side of the aisle. Just a total distaste for helping workers and sort of that continuing you're on your own mentality.
Yeah. What bothers me, Celeste, and my entire working life, the last 30 years, I've been hearing the new economy during the Reagan years. It was we're going to be a service-based economy. We'll shove all those dirty manufacturing jobs, those dirty blue-collar jobs. We'll ship those over to somewhere else, and they can deal with the environmental problems and all of that. We're going to be better than that. And we've been hearing this my whole working life, that we're going to have this newer economy, this economy that's going to be, easier for us and more prosperous. And yet, I got to be honest, I'm starting to look at the economy that my grandparents lived under, and it actually worked pretty well for them.
Yeah, exactly. I think, look, we are in a transition, and I'm not sure when the great new economy is going to get here. But part of the problem is that the reason the economy worked better for your grandparents is because the government made it so. It wasn't an accident. It was New Deal programs. It was the creation of the National Labor Rights Act. It was the creation of Social Security, unemployment insurance, all these systems that created space for workers to organize and bargain for better, social safety nets, and it was never perfect. But those are policy choices, and a lot of those things, labor rights in the workplace have been eroded. Safety nets have been eroded, and to get whatever this new economy is going to be one that promotes workers rising up to the middle class, that says we're, not just the talking point of if we work hard and play fair, we're going to get a fair deal, but an economy that does that, we have to put those rules in place. And that includes, of course, fair trade rules, but also fair rules domestically. We have to start investing in America again. The New Deal was the age of really investing in our infrastructure. And we were a country that was the envy of the world in terms of our infrastructure. And now we talk about, well, we've got to attract this foreign investment. And I think that's tough when many cities across America have sort of a 1970s era infrastructure at best. And firms can look at China, and it's not just that they have lower wages and weak labor rights and, non-existent
environmental rights, sure.
Right. But they have brand new high-speed rail, brand new ports. They do invest in themselves as a country, and that's a choice we have to get back to in America.
What I would argue, Celeste, is we the American consumer, we're the one who is investing in China by buying all of their goods, and we're the one subsidizing all of that.
Yes, we can certainly make better decisions as consumers, absolutely. And corporations have to make better decisions. That we have very low standards here as compared to some other countries of the obligations of corporations. It has become, again, kind of started in the 80s, sort of shareholder value. Like, let's only look at this quarter and what we're getting for shareholders. And in the past, it was, wait a minute, our workers are also stakeholders, and the communities that we operate in are also stakeholders. And what can we do for long-term value? And I think there are so many things that need to change in our economy and society to get to a place where it's not rigged against the average worker. And trade is a part of it. And we really hope that today's vote is a first step in a long march toward changing the conversation about the rules, and that workers have to have a say in the economic rules that govern their lives, including in trade rules.
I'm with you. And, for all the talk I hear of inequality and all of that, I would argue it's our trade policy is one of the main drivers of that inequality. You cannot have a working class in this country that's fighting against desperate nations and being pushed towards desperate status.
Right. But how often are workers told here, don't you dare vote to organize a union because we'll move the factory away?
Well, it's even worse than that, Celeste. I've actually had people tell me that their employer comes to them and tells them that they had better write a letter to their member of Congress because they want this subsidy or this loophole, or you better write a letter to your member of Congress because we want this grant or we want that. And if you don't, then we're going to get rid of you anyway. So it's gotten even beyond whether you want to join a union or not. It's got to where we've turned all of these people into corporate lobbyists that they don't actually benefit from. It's really a very twisted situation.
Right. That's the problem, is that they don't benefit. I mean, you've got corporations posting record profits on Wall Street, in their earnings reports. And at this very same time, going to their workers and saying, you've got to take a pay cut or a benefits cut, or, give up seniority rights or whatever. And that's not the right conversation. The right conversation should be, you, the workers, helped us to post record profits. You get a share in the wealth that you create. But because the expectations, I think, of many American workers now have been so diminished due to what's been happening over the past decade and more, that often, workers are afraid.
Just happy to have a job.
Stand up. Happy to have a job. And there's also this weird, when they see a worker who is doing well, has decent pay, has decent benefits, it seems like the question used to be, how can I get that too? Oh, they have a union, maybe I need a union so I can get that too. And now we so often hear, well, why do they have that and I don't? Let's take it away from them, particularly against public sector workers. And we've got to change the conversation again. We've got to change that thinking, because we can all do better. And we know that when we all do better, we all do better.
Absolutely. So let me ask you a last line of questioning then, because I understand there's possibly a vote that Boehner wants to have later if they can do enough arm twisting and deal making. Maybe Monday, who knows? Where do you see this going? Because like we said at the beginning, it's not going away. Where do you see this going on the short term, and then maybe the longer term?
Well, in the short term, Mr. Boehner made a motion to reconsider, which means that it's possible that the Republican leadership in the House can bring back up that TAA portion of the vote that failed. And if they can change 90 or so votes on the Republican side from no's to yeses, that changes the outcome of the bill. And then all of a sudden that bill is successful. That seems like a very high hurdle.
Yeah.
So they might try it and fail, or they might not. They might do the lobbying and say there aren't that many votes to flip. And if they don't do that, the Republican leadership still has the opportunity to bring up the exact same fast track bill, pass it through the House, assuming it gets the votes. That vote was also quite close. And if a few, yes, votes flip our way, it's defeated. But assuming that passes, they could try and send that to the Senate. And if the Senate passes it, send that to the president. Now, I think a fast track standalone without TAA could have problems in the Senate. Even Senator Wyden has said in the past he would not support a trade promotion authority bill without trade adjustment assistance. And I think it's an open question whether the president would sign it. You know, he made an impassioned plea today for trade adjustment assistance, so it's not clear, you know, that he would sign a fast track without trade adjustment assistance. So there, you know, you could essentially game this forever. And what we're saying is like there are always many opportunities for workers to lose, you know, in this scenario. But what we're hoping is that folks are, you know, even staunch opponents of, you know, the more progressive type of trade agenda that we've been trying to advance might say, we need more votes here, and the way to get more votes is to open the conversation and give folks like Sandy Levin, who put forth a very thoughtful substitute bill on trade promotion authority, bring them into the conversation and see what we can do to gain more votes in a bipartisan way. And that's, you know, that's obviously the best possible outcome rather than one of these, you know, where they stick with bad fast track and try to move that alone.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
that is the hope. The hope is that we move forward instead of continue on the road to backward.
Yeah.
It just seems logical. But again, this is Washington. I don't have a lot of confidence.
Yeah. Well, confidence, that's a question, but certainly hope and optimism, and now at least a reason to have some hope and optimism.
All right. Well, the hope and optimism. The good thing is today, a victory for the folks who were fighting for this. People like me for the last several years have been talking about this. I think this is a good thing. But the fight now it's time to ramp it up, I think. So that's a good thing as well. Keep people active, engaged, and that's a good thing.
Absolutely. We need them.
Celeste, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
All righty, Celeste Drake. She is the Trade and Globalization Policy Specialist over at the FFL-CIO. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
And he said I was once like you, and I used to protest too. But the powers that be were too great to walk away from the rebel faith.
I guess the question would be, if he shouldn't talk about it, should you?
So why not take the overwhelming majority of scientists at their word?
Major media steps up, challenges presidential candidate Rick Santorum on climate science denial. The world's largest economies put an expiration date on fossil fuels. Want to see how climate change will affect your grandkids? NASA has just the thing. Plus, secret donors gave $125 million to climate denial front groups in just 3 years.
Man, I would have been a climate denier had I known it paid off so well. All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I get it, Santorum. You thought the Pope was on your side, man. I know it must hurt when the man whose job is still steeped in medieval traditions is ahead of you on climate change.
Yep, this is your Green News Report.
Instead of telling the Pope to shut up, why don't you just start listening?
Okay, Desi Doyen, we now have word that this Santa Barbara oil spill about 3 weeks ago has so far cost $62 million to clean up, as it has sullied 97 miles of coastline, and there is no timetable for when the cleanup, if ever, will be complete.
Gee, I wonder how much a solar spill cost that day.
In any event, what do you got for us today, Des?
Well, first, climate change is now officially an actual thing in the 2016 presidential race. Republican presidential candidate and former Senator Rick Santorum was actually challenged about his recent remarks criticizing
Oh, he's challenged, all right.
Well, yeah, but he was challenged for criticizing Pope Francis over the Pope calling on Catholics to act on global warming and protect creation. Santorum said the Pope should leave science to the scientists. scientists. CNN's Jake Tapper challenged him.
So why not take the overwhelming majority of scientists at their word and take seriously that humans are contributing to climate change with potentially disastrous results?
Well, I would say this, that there are a lot of scientists who believe that. There's a lot of scientists who don't.
Not really.
And I think it's important that we take very measured responses. And some of the responses that are being proposed actually do very, very little to combat the problem.
Which is actually also not true. But surprisingly, Santorum was even challenged in the belly of the climate change denial beast of Fox News. Here he is on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace.
You don't think the Pope has a right to talk about this?
Pope can talk about whatever he wants to talk about. I'm just saying, what should the Pope use his moral authority for? And I would make the argument.
He would say he's protecting the earth.
I would say that that's an important thing to do, but I think there are more pressing problems confronting the earth than climate change.
Good luck with that, Rick.
Yeah, and of course what he's really saying is that the more important things are protecting profits for the fossil fuel industry.
Yep.
But undeterred are the folks at the fossil fuel-funded Heartland Institute, which hosted its 10th annual conference promoting climate change denial in the nation's capital this week. Republican Senator James Inhofe of Oklahoma, who believes climate science is a hoax and a global conspiracy, received a special award for political leadership on climate change.
You mean the guy who said this?
The notion that man-made gases cause global warming is probably the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people.
Yep. And now we know that the Heartland Institute has received nearly $4 million since just 2011 to fund their climate change denial, and that was from secret donors. That's according to a new analysis of tax records by The Guardian, which finds that the network of think tanks and activist groups that spread disinformation about climate science have received more than $125 million in total in just the last 3 years. And that's from just two organizations called the Donors Trust and the Donors Capital Fund.
The Donors Trust is related to the Koch brothers, as I recall. And who is this other group?
Donors Capital Fund is also related to the Koch brothers.
Imagine that.
Meanwhile, a big move from the G7. The leaders of the world's 7 biggest economies have put an expiration date on fossil fuels. German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the US, UK, France, Italy, Japan, and Canada announced this week that they have agreed to decarbonize their economies during this century with a goal of achieving zero carbon emissions by 2100. Now, that effectively declares the end of the fossil fuel era. It's only a declaration, but the G7 leaders say it will be part of a push for a strong UN climate treaty later this year. Finally, if you want to know how climate change will specifically impact your kids and grandkids and your town,
I do.
Now you can get really specific with a new climate impact tool released by NASA this week. It gets really, really detailed and lets you peer into the future from 2050 to 2100 to see the projected impacts in heat, drought, and rainfall for your town.
What a tool. For much more on that story and all of the others we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
There's only 3 things left now that I can do. Deny.
Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
Decent days, quality is in play. Work is organized without haste. Have the phone in your workplace. Work with your manager face to face. Let's go! It's starting again.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, big. I'm still saying this is a huge victory for those of us who have been pointing out how negative this trade agreement is going to be, how harmful it's going to be to American workers, how bad it will be for the country, and I think for the globe. So I'm going to take this as a huge victory of grassroots activism, of folks calling their congressmen, calling their senators, writing letters to the editor, writing letters to their representatives. Because look, the corporate-controlled mainstream for-profit media, they didn't do it. That's why I think this is a great opportunity and a huge victory. But it doesn't stop here, as I understand. Potentially another vote this afternoon, doubt it. But also on Monday, Tuesday, who knows what comes up, which is why we've got to stay on this. Anyway, there's a part of it that I wanted to talk about, because when I decided about today, I didn't think this would all be over by now. But to me, the TAA part of this was very important, the trade adjustment assistance, and the fact that they tried to tie in Medicare cuts. That just blows my mind that we know we're going to screw you out of your job, but heck, let's take your Medicare too. Just seems really twisted to me, which is why we've asked Rich Fiesta. He's the president of the Alliance for Retired Americans to come talk with us. Rich, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, great to be back with you again.
So I look at this kind of unholy marriage, if you will, of the trade adjustment assistance and Medicare cuts. And I guess if you didn't mean to kill the whole thing, then what else could you have been thinking by tying the two of those things together?
Yes, this was an example where the hubris of Speaker John Boehner and Paul Ryan, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee that oversees trade, Medicare, and Social Security, went a bridge too far, that they thought they could be cute by tying Medicare cuts into the TAA, the Trade Adjustment Assistance Program, and wrap it all in a nice big bow and send it off to the White House, and it blew up in their faces.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this and at first I go, is John Boehner and Paul Ryan on our side? Was this the poison pill designed to kill it because they don't like Obama trade? And I'm going, no, these guys are free traders. And I think you're exactly right. I think they really believed that the president would push through their poison and they'd get the twofer.
Yeah, and it was their clever little way of trying to get Democrats to get on record to cut Medicare in the first place, and then use Medicare savings, not for Medicare where it really belongs, but for other purposes. In this case, it would be the TAA program, and it was an outrage. It was a poorly constructed idea, and it blew up in their faces.
Now you do this work every day, and as the president there of the Alliance for Retired Americans, it's got to make you enraged anytime you see these kind of this kind of language. We're going to have savings from cutting things like Medicare. I mean, because it rips me off. I'm still trying to figure out what the savings are. We're stealing from people.
Right, exactly. Actually, I'm the executive director. We have a terrific president, longtime trade unionist, Barbara Easterling, who was the longtime CWA International Secretary Treasurer, the first woman to hold National AFL-CIO office when she was Secretary Treasurer there. So got to get in a plug for Barbara. But it was a great victory for common sense, if nothing else, Rick, that taking Medicare and trying to slice it up and play different interest groups, seniors off against workers who may need trade adjusted assistance, and it just didn't work. And they're in the smoking wreckage of that idea right now. But they've served notice. They want to bring it up for another vote next week. So we can't take the total victory lap just yet.
Right. So is it possible that they're able to strip out the overreach, which is the Medicare cuts? Is it possible to strip that out of there and then just pass through the inadequate TAA funding that they had? Because this is the part that gets me. There's, I think, $450 million in trade adjustment assistance money that they would give for people that they know are going to lose their job because of this agreement. But they wanted to strip some like $700 million from Medicare. So they actually wanted to not just, because I can almost make the argument that you did one for one, but I don't get the other part of it.
Yeah, they would use it for other things in this package. There was a whole customs bill, and there were other parts of the legislation that also had nothing to do with Medicare. So you're right. They were going to take $700 out of Medicare by keeping, remember that sequester from last year, part of it's in place that extended up into 2024. And then, not talked about as much, was another $250 million in Medicare cuts through the kidney dialysis program under Medicare. So the total package was $950 million, almost $1 billion out of Medicare that would be cut in order to pay for these other non-Medicare programs. Just a total outrage.
Just completely outrageous. Now, is it where I was going to begin with? Is it possible for them just to strip that Medicare part out of and go forward with the trade adjustment assistance?
Well, then they would have to send the package back to the U.S. Senate and start all over. I mean, their original plan was to take what the Senate did, kind of weld together the TAA with the fast track authority and moved them directly to the president after the vote today. Well, of course, that didn't happen. So they would, if they would do, as you said, strip it out, change it in somehow or another, and then get the votes to pass it, which is still a big hurdle because we had 302 votes on our side.
Yeah.
It would have to go back to the Senate, and that would not be a bad consequence for us, we believe, because the more this comes out into the public and the more people understand what's in it, the opposition, which is already substantial, grows even stronger and louder.
So now let's say they are able to strip out the Medicare portion of this, because I got from what I'm hearing, that was one of the big hurdles is getting, the Democrats who want to vote for the trade adjustment, who want to vote for the TPA, which they did 219 to 211, but just couldn't swallow this trade adjustment bill. By stripping that out, if it goes back to the Senate, what chances do we have to stop it there?
Well, then we did, our side did what the Senate rules do, that if you get 41 votes, you can stop legislation, and we had that at the first vote of the test vote last month in the Senate. So we can go to work on trying to keep 41 senators on our side as well there.
So this could drag on into the fall and early next year, perhaps, and then be dead until the next president comes into office.
That's a potential. You would think Congress would have better things to go work on in the meantime.
Yeah, which kind of makes tomorrow's speech by Hillary Clinton kind of interesting at the timing, because I think she thought this whole TPP thing would be over by then, because then it opens up that question to who the next president is. Do they pursue this Bush era policy that Obama might not have been able to get through as well?
Yep. Great questions for 2016. No doubt about that, Rick.
Give us something to do. But this is, I think, a wonderful victory, and something I think activists and folks who've been working on this should celebrate, but also come Monday, continue those phone calls and writing those letters.
Amen.
Rich, I appreciate your thoughts on this, and thanks for giving us your side.
Always great to be with you, and look forward to the next time with you again, Rick, and maybe we'll have some more good news.
All righty. Can't wait. Thanks so much, Rich Fiesta, Executive Director of the Alliance for Retired Americans. We're going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. Still there?
It's gonna be a bright, sunshiny day.
Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
The debilitating spread of inequality between the super-rich 1%ers and America's downwardly mobile majority is of huge economic, political, and cultural significance to our country. So why is it largely ignored by the television media? Meet David Zaslav, CEO of the Discovery Channel's cable TV empire. His salary last year was $3 million, but it was padded with an extra $6 million bonus, nearly $2 million in perks, and a neat $145 million in special stock gimmies. A total paycheck of $156 million. For one guy in 1 year. Zaslav is not just a 1%er, but a top 1,000th of the 1%ers. Les Moonves at CBS is up there too, wallowing in the $54 million he was paid in 2014. In fact, of the 10 most lavishly paid corporate chieftains last year, 6 are television barons, with Comcast, Disney, Time Warner, and Verizon joining the elite class. Someone should cast the whole bunch of them in a reality TV show called The Wealth Gap or Us. What genius do they have that warrants such extravagant pay? None. It's simply that they are lucky hirelings of an exclusive club of wealth that owns and controls most television conglomerates. The billionaire media tycoon Sumner Redstone, for example, owns nearly 80% of the voting stock of both CBS and Viacom. So $50 million for Moonves is not a stretch for him, nor can other shareholders stop his excess. Likewise, only 3 billionaires control Discovery, and $156 million for Zaslav is nothing to them. This is Jim Hightower saying, when so few people with such massive wealth control the media is not likely to turn its public spotlight on the malefactions of great wealth.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all alone, all alone in a time of need. Because he's racing.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So I look at this, and to me, I got to tell you, big news. Just my thought, and I'm thrilled, and that all of the things we've been talking about on this program over the last several years, I think someone's paying attention to. So good stuff. If you want a job, this is the next generation, and kind of just shows you the direction our country's going into. I saw this article over at www.com. It's one of these fashion kind of site places. They point out that the Dream Downtown Hotel in New York City's Meatpacking District, they have a new concierge service, brand new, basically one of its kind. That if you want a pair of sneakers, that's right, you want a pair of tennis shoes, you want a pair of shoes, go running around, a pair of kicks, you want to get that latest old school style on your piggies there. They've got a sneaker concierge. And I got to be honest, I never actually thought those two words would ever find their way together. I just never did. I never thought that sneaker concierge. I never thought that. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. I never thought that would ever come together.
Yeah, no, me either. But maybe they could have helped me out last week when I was looking for my new pair of Adidas shoes that seem to have gone off the market.
Yeah, the ones made in Vietnam.
Thanks. Well, hey, I can't control that. I mean,
you can control what you buy. You can absolutely control what you put on your feet. In fact, maybe you should have gone to the sneaker concierge, and he could have picked you up a pair of American-made shoes, like the New Balance I've got on my feet. Just could have thought of that.
Maybe,
but you had to chime in with your Adidas. All right.
I like my Adidas. I'm just a hipster wearing Adidas shoes. Okay. That's it.
Again, another problem I have with that whole I'm a hipster. Oh, I wear foreign-made shoes. Ooh. Thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Hey, I did buy a American-made Feel the Burn t-shirt last night a couple days ago online. So there we go. I decided to choose.
Oh, you did your part.
I decided
we can all rest now.
I decided to buy the American Apparel shirt, which is made in Los Angeles, compared to the Fruit of the Loom shirt. I paid an extra $6 for that shirt too. Okay, thank you very much. So I am supporting the American economy.
Yeah, okay. Keep telling yourself that, Mr. I wear Vietnamese-made shoes. All right, good.
I'll actually go look right now.
All right.
They might be Sri Lanka.
They're probably Chinese.
Maybe.
No, I'm sure Sri Lanka, they make apparel. They don't make shoes. They make mostly shirts, t-shirts. But China's probably where it's at.
No, it's Vietnam.
Vietnam, yeah, because that's where all the shoes are made now. It's where everything, thanks to Nike's been the driver. Nike's like the Walmart. They're the driver of all this. And when they started going to Vietnam, you don't think that the factory there is just Nike shoes. It's all of them.
I was in a store over the weekend actually looking for some clothes, and I was looking at where some of the tags. And I can't believe I saw Sri Lanka, Brunei, and like all these other like little southwestern, or the Pacific Southwest countries I've never even heard of before.
Which is why we take a globe with us when we take the kids clothes shopping. When they go for school, good globe. This is where the kids in sweatshops make your clothing.
It used to be Latin America. Now it's Asia, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's where the cheapest, most exploitable labor is. It is what it is. And these trade agreements, this is what pushes us in that direction. And it's frustrating to me. It's angering to me. And the sad reality is we can be as upset as we want about it. And look, I can bust your shoes about your shoes. The sad reality is there's only a handful of choices for consumers to buy American-made apparel, be it shoes or clothing or any of that. A handful. And the sad reality is some of those companies that do sell them, they're gouging your eyes out because they know you're like me. I'm looking specifically for that product.
Or even if you try to buy Levi's these days, like the
I
Levi's,
don't think any of those are made in the U.S.
no,
are they?
I think there's some of them, but the Levi's that are sold in like the J.C. Penney's or the Sears, or your lower end ones are going to be the ones made in overseas. But I think like if you get the designer brands, they're going to be up to upwards of $100, $150 a pair, which I would never spend that much money on
doesn't
jeans.
happen. It is what it is. Anyway, congratulations on these shoes there. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show.
You don't have a dime to spare. Corporations get billions in welfare. While millions in this country don't have a dime to spare. Millions in this country don't have a dime to spare. Folks have billions in this country and not a dime to spare.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises.
For Workers Independent News, I'm Joanne Powers. In a big win for workers on Wednesday, the New York City Council voted to enact the Car Wash Accountability Act. The act seeks to address abuses that hurt consumers and the low-wage, mostly immigrant car wash workers. David Mertz, New York City director of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union.
You had workers working 60, 70 hours a week or more, wouldn't be getting paid overtime. Some of them wouldn't even be getting paid a legal minimum wage at all, working with harsh chemicals during the hottest days of the year, the coldest days of the year. Wage theft, a lot of them reported having their tips stolen.
In order to obtain a license, car wash owners must show they are meeting all applicable environmental and labor standards. The law also requires owners to obtain a surety bond.
We've had situations where workers won substantial wage theft judgments and then were never able to collect on those judgments. The owners just split. They shuffled corporation papers, were able to get away from actually being held responsible for paying those judgments. And the surety bond will make sure that that no longer can occur.
Will the Trans-Pacific Partnership be a trade deal or a raw deal? With the U.S. Congress expected to vote this Friday on fast-tracking the TPP, leading dissidents in Vietnam's underground labor movement want members of Congress to know that a TPP which leaves Vietnamese workers exploited is also bad for American workers. Until the Vietnamese government ends systematic labor rights violations, including unsafe working conditions, poverty, wages, and widespread repression of labor activists, the workers are calling on the U.S. Congress to vote no. Democrats say the future of fast-track trade authority also hinges on a bill which would provide assistance to workers who lose their jobs as a result of the TPP. The House bill would fund this through tax enforcement, rather than cuts to Medicaid included in the Senate version. On Tuesday, the National Labor Relations Board sided with workers at the Terex Manufacturing Company in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. After painters at the plant voted overwhelmingly to unionize, the company started committing various violations to prevent assembly workers from doing the same. International Brotherhood of Boilermakers Industrial Sector Executive Director Tyler Brown.
Having captive audience meetings. The plant manager threatened to close the plant, said he had closed a lot of other union plants. Those are all violations of the National Labor Relations Act.
The NLRB issued a rare Gissel bargaining order requiring the company to negotiate with the Boilermakers Union as the workers' exclusive bargaining representative.
Basically, the board issues a Gissel bargaining order when they feel like the employer's unfair labor practices are so egregious, the results of having a fair rerun election just don't exist.
13 workers, almost a third of the unit, were also fired for organizing activities. The NLRB required Terex to reinstate the workers to their jobs, pay full back pay, and interest.
For many years now, labor law has been significantly tilted in favor of employers. It's kind of nice to see a government agency such as the National Labor Relations Board fighting for and seeking justice on behalf of these workers.
This newscast made possible in part through underwriting support from AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, and from the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
I got to tell you, if you'd seen this TAA pass today with the Medicare cuts in it, I would have loved to have seen the grannies out there with their walkers and their sticks up on Capitol Hill, giving them their comeuppance, or as something I read the other day, work them over pretty good. I think I would have liked to have seen that, but I don't want the negative, nasty, horrible effects of this just insane trade agreement that, I sat 20 feet away from the president when he was the candidate saying, you can trust me. I'm not going to pass any of that bad stuff. And yet here we are. Here we are. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about the victory today, and today is a victory, and we should revel in the fact that we on this level we won. This is nowhere near the end of it. This is just one battle in a very long war on bad trade agreements, but still, you got to celebrate your victories. I've asked Dr. Eric Loomis, assistant professor at the University of Rhode Island, also a fantastic blogger over at the Lawyers, Guns, and Money blog, to come talk with us today. Eric, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, I figured we would maybe work through some of the alphabet soup that is our trade agreement. Because I got a couple of emails from people going, I'm confused. I don't know what was passed, what wasn't. And the TPA did pass. The Trade Promotion Authority did pass 219 to 211. It was the Trade Adjustment Assistance thing that didn't. That got shot down 126 to 302.
Yeah, it's so basically for people who are still not really sure what's going on. So the TAA, the Trade Adjustment Assistance, basically is a pool of money that is supposed to help retrain workers if they lose their jobs to outsourcing, or sometimes it's used in other ways. But I think that organized labor realized that if you could defeat the TAA in the House, that what that would do would mean that it would be basically impossible to pass the fast-track bill where both the Senate and the House could agree on it, because Democrats are simply not going to vote for this without the TAA. And many Republicans don't want it because, of course, Republicans don't care about workers who lose their jobs. And so by defeating it, I know many labor leaders were lobbying Congress over the last few days to say no to this. What it does is it tells the president that this bill, this fast track, this Trans-Pacific Partnership, that is going to take even more jobs out of Americans' hands or out of take more jobs away from Americans and send them to Vietnam and send them to Malaysia, is something that they're simply not going to accept. So it's a major victory. It's the first step, but it is still a major victory.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of this, though, when you talk about this trade adjustment assistance, some of the statistics that I saw on it were just ridiculous. Where half of the people who lost their jobs may have gotten it, according to the Department of Labor. And even those folks, didn't get all that they were supposed to. And you look at the jobs that come afterwards, and they're never as well compensated as the ones you lost. And it's this push towards the quote unquote new economy. I got to be honest, I was much happier with the other one.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, there was a study that came out in 2012 that showed that people who received TAA assistance in the long term, there's really no evidence that helped them because they're being trained for non-existent jobs. If you're creating a jobless economy for the working class, you can be trained. The government can train you, but if there's no job at the end of it, what is it really doing for you? If we want a successful working class and middle class in this country, what we need are the jobs that we already have and the jobs that we used to have. That's what created the middle class. And a little bit of government assistance is not for non-existent jobs is not going to make a difference there. So I totally agree. I think that the economy that we used to have, the remnants of the economy that we do have, is going to be better than an economy after the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And it's worth noting that for 25, 30 years, we've been hearing over and over again, that these trade agreements are going to lead to a new economy, an information economy. It's going to be better for workers in the long run. It's going to, the middle class will turn out fine. Well, look where we're at. All of that's not true. Nobody's even claiming anymore that some information economy is going to, save the American working class and middle class. I mean, they're not even pretending anymore. It's just some vague hope that somehow that's going to create jobs.
Yeah, and under the best line that I've heard is, we're going to create jobs on our innovation. So we're going to come up with the ideas, and then we're going to outsource the ideas. That doesn't employ an awful lot of people.
That's right. I mean, I think that there's an emphasis in a lot of economic planning and an emphasis in our society that's all about innovation and being on top. But you know what? Not everybody can be on top in a nation. Not everybody's going to be that innovator. And people who tend to be so-called, quote, innovators often started out as rich people to begin with, and they have all kinds of advantages that everyday people don't have. What we need to be focusing on is not the so-called innovators. And Americans have had inventors and people all the time throughout its history that have created things. We need to focus on the masses, millions and hundreds of millions of people in this country who are dependent on a good, stable job in order to live a dignified life. And that has completely disappeared from our conversation, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Although thanks to those who voted against the TIA today, there's at least a push to put this back on the table.
So is there an opportunity during all this to maybe talk about one of the things that I firmly believe in is you need to have domestic consumption, domestic production. I just busted my producer's shoes here for buying shoes from Vietnam. But the truth of the matter is there are very few opportunities for people to buy American made shoes. In fact, there's a couple lines of New Balance that I'm able to find, but those are getting harder and harder to find. The only chances you've got are China or Vietnam right now.
Right. And I think that, I think that, buying domestic made goods, buying union made goods, that's great when you can do it. But as you're saying, it's often very, very hard when all the shoe production's been moved overseas, when all the apparel production's been moved overseas, then you're in a situation where you don't have too many other options. And I think that, if you listen to the leaders of these workers' movements in Vietnam, these workers' movements in Bangladesh, what they're asking of Americans is to support their struggles because, those workers are also fellow workers. Those workers are also people trying to live dignified lives. And, the system that we've created and the Trans-Pacific Partnership would just make worse is a system of extreme outsourcing where companies can just move wherever they want all over the globe if their workers unionize, if their workers demand a dignified life, if their workers demand pay raises. And so, what we need to do, if we're not going to make shoes in the United States, if we're not going to make clothing in the United States, we need to work to try to ensure that those workers in Vietnam and in Bangladesh are also able to live a decent life. And they have concrete demands that we need to support.
That's an excellent point. But at the end of this, I'm of the mindset that we need to have domestic consumption, domestic production. The things that you make in your country, you use to service your folks. Everybody seems to be thinking that the best way to have trade is everyone sets up their economies on export models. Oh, we're going to export all of our goods. Not everyone can export to everyone else because someone's got to be the dumping ground. And sadly, we tend to be that dumping ground.
Well, I think that, what has disappeared from the conversation is I think that you have to have some production in the United States. The American working class does need jobs. And I think that, we do need to, maybe the global economy is not going to ever, I think, completely go away or anything like that. But I think that we as a nation, as a political system, as citizens, need to ensure that everyday people are going to have decent jobs. And those decent jobs need to be producing something. And, you can have a lot of government jobs, you can have a lot of other kinds of work, and that's all fine and good. But we do need to be producing something because people need work. And this idea that we are going to pursue economic policies that basically are going to be strictly global trade, which really just are about the interests of the nation's 1% and pushing this, pushing economic policies that are going to put more money in their already very deep pockets, is very skewed. And so if you're not going to support some kind of real life jobs, concrete jobs for the American working class, you're dooming that class. And so, we have to be producing something.
Exactly.
And right now, nobody's really talking about that. Certainly the president's not talking about that.
Yeah, we seem to be okay with the fact that we know we're going to lose jobs in this, and that's the weird thing for me. And here's on the labor and environmental front, I do believe, and I agree with Elizabeth Warren, who said that she doesn't doubt the sincerity of the president when he says that this agreement's got a strong environmental and he believes that there's strong environmental and labor protection. Unprecedented was her word. But at the level of unprecedented doesn't impress me because the past agreements haven't really had any.
Right. And I think that she's right. I think the president does genuinely believe this, but what that shows is just how deep the belief in this, free market world economy goes among our political leadership, that even questioning it is something that so many of our politicians are unwilling to do. And, this idea of, I mean, first of all, we don't know what these protections, these standards are, because of course the Trans-Pacific Partnership has been negotiated secret, and we only have a vague understanding of what the provisions actually are. But there's no evidence at all that any of these so-called enforceable provisions, or these so-called unprecedented protections, are going to have any real enforcement mechanism. And certainly they're not going to put power in the hands of workers themselves to enforce these, so that if a worker in a Vietnam factory is being exploited by Nike, that worker is going to be able to do anything about it. And if you don't have worker protections, if you don't place power in the hands of working people, and you're just going to rely on these companies and their governments that the companies basically are owning, I don't think you're really going to accomplish much of anything. So I'm extremely skeptical that there's going to be any sort of that there's really any sort of meaningful protections in this Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I knew things were not going to go well for the White House today when I read the Caroline Kennedy op-ed that she put out earlier today over at Politico, is where I saw it was at Politico, saying that her father, that JFK, would have been all in favor of this because he was a free trader. And I'm going, I don't know, I'm not buying that.
Well, that's a ridiculous argument anyway. I thought that was a very insulting argument because it assumes that because this mythical JFK supported a policy 50 years ago, or more than 50 years ago now, that we should support it today. Well, I guess there's a whole lot of bad JFK policies that I don't think that we should be supporting. I mean, should we revisit the invasion of Cuba because JFK approved the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961? I mean, no, of course not. It's an insulting argument that is basically playing on nostalgia for a past president, assuming that he would support this policy. And I was really curious about that because, Caroline Kennedy is, of course, the ambassador to Japan. And I'm really wondering if this wasn't a pretty unsubtle move by the Obama administration to try to push PR by basically openly playing on how older Democrats love JFK. And I thought it was really, really insulting.
Yeah, I tweeted out today. Well, let's find out what the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus have to say, because I've got as much chance of asking them as I have asking JFK. And in fact, JFK and we read the same sections of the TPP. None.
Right. Exactly.
But I look at this and I'm thrilled that where we are at this moment. But Monday is a whole different day. Where do you see this thing going?
I think there's going to come back. I think, I was reading earlier today, just a little while before talking to you, that, Nancy Pelosi is making an argument that, maybe with stronger provisions, more money in the TAA, as well as additional infrastructure spending that could be placed on the bill, that maybe Democrats would revisit it. I don't know. I think that the overwhelming defeat of this bill was pretty significant. You'd really have to have about 100 voters, about 100 Congress people switch, which could be a combination of Democrats and Republicans, but 100 people switching in a highly polarized environment does seem slightly unlikely to me. And so I think that if this had failed by, say, 10 votes or 15 or 20 votes, I would be really skeptical that it would hold. But given that it was over 100 votes, I really do, the more I think about it, the more I believe that this might be a really big victory for the American working class. But it's far from over. It's going to come back. And I would be worried as well, potentially, that, Obama's going to push Democrats, if there is no TAA, still support the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So I think it's a major victory, but it's still fairly early in the battle, and we need to be ready to build on this.
Do you see a potential scenario where the TAA isn't included in this, to where just TPA and fast track goes through without the TAA?
That would be my concern. Yes, I think that, I think what would happen in that scenario is that it would pass the House, and then it would go to the Senate. And what you would have to do in the Senate is basically get 60 votes. So you'd have to peel off enough Democratic voters to vote for or Democratic senators to vote for a Trans-Pacific Partnership without any worker assistance at all. Are there 6 Democrats that will do that? Well, that's a really good question. I mean, I don't know. I think that if the Obama administration thought it could do it, it might have already been floating that idea. But that is my concern, is that this could pass with no TAA at all. And I think that's one of the things we're going to have to focus on, which is going to need some pretty heavy lobbying of some centrist Democratic senators.
Yeah. Last question I've got for you. And looking at this, and this, I've been thinking about the potential historical significance of this, because I I have met no one who says, this is the way it's going to go. I mean, this was an overwhelming defeat of grassroots activism, in my view, because I didn't see much in the corporate controlled mainstream media about this one side or another. It was like radio silence.
Yeah. It's somewhat surprising to me as well. And, once again, I think that if we're thinking about the historical significance of it, and it's hard to know, but I think that for a very long time, there's been enough centrist Democrats or right-wing Democrats that were willing to align with Republicans on sending American jobs abroad, that, you have NAFTA pass or other trade agreements with other nations. And, the organized labor suffered and workers suffered, and nobody seemed to care that much. And I think that what you're seeing now is, in many ways, a fairly united Democratic Party. I was surprised at the unity within the Democratic Party, outside the president, of course, and a few others, but really unity in the Democratic Party opposing this bill without significant assistance to workers. And so, again, it's early, and I don't want to make any broad predictions about historical significance. But if this does get defeated in the end, it will be a real victory for American workers, and a real sign that working class issues and that trade and the jobs are really back on the agenda in this country for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, and it may actually be a point at which we start pulling people back together. And which is the hope. I mean, 302 votes against this. That's pretty sizable.
Yeah, it's very, very large and quite impressive.
Dr. Loomis, I appreciate you taking time for us. I look forward to talking to you again.
Always glad to be on. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around and listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Never you will look back again. You fight on to the end. Together we will live on forevermore. This land we have defended from all things dark and cruel. Now we are defenseless.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. In 1981, the Los Angeles Dodgers dropped the first 2 games of the World Series to their rivals, the New York Yankees. The Dodgers would come roaring back, sweeping the next 4 games, and so closed the curtain on one of the strangest seasons in baseball history. The strangeness of the season began on this day in labor history. This was the first day of a strike that would last until August 9th. Nearly a third of all games were canceled. The reason for the strike was free agency. The players had won the right to become free agents a year after their contracts ended. Before this change, owners could renew players' contracts year after year, effectively stopping players from testing their market value with other teams. Determined to reverse the gains won by the players' union, owners brought in Roy Graby as a negotiator. Graby had a tough reputation for representing management for General Electric and for Pan American World Airlines. He took that same hard-nosed approach to the baseball bargaining table. The owners wanted the right to receive a player of comparable value for any player lost to free agency. This would effectively discourage teams from signing free agents if they had to give up another valuable player in return. The players' union understood this was a tactic to undermine free agency. Many also saw it as an attempt to break the players' union. Sports Illustrated magazine declared it the walkout owners provoked. Finally, the 2 sides agreed to a compromise that kept the practice of free agency intact. In a controversial decision, baseball owners decided to split the season into 2. The teams with the best records from each half of the strike-divided season went to the playoffs. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
Last time we talked of the lost hope of finding the easy water route to the Pacific that Thomas Jefferson had always thought existed. But as often happens, while searching and exploring for one thing, another is found. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark did not turn back when they couldn't find the expected route to the west. Instead, they turned to their American Indian friends. With the help of a Shoshone woman named Sacagawea, they discovered and documented the Great Northwest. By November of 1805, almost 2 years into the trip, Lewis and Clark had a real feel of the richness and enormity of the North American continent. In the 1950s, Bernard DeVoto edited their journals, and he wrote, "It was the first report on the West. It satisfied desire, and it created desire, the desire of a westering nation. And when thinking of Lewis and Clark, don't forget Thomas Jefferson, their friend that stirred up the adventure." This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
We're walking the streets. We know where we'll meet. Can't stop us. They don't know why. They try.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Seems there's a bit of confusion with the alphabet soup and the votes that happened today. I've gotten a number of emails from folks going, I'm not quite getting, you're throwing TAA out there, you're throwing TPA out there, throwing fast track FTA out there, might as well throw a PNRT out there, permanent normal trade relations, might as well throw WTO and GATT, and might as well throw all that stuff into the alphabet soup of trade. What happened today was simply there were two votes. And this is what this come out of the Senate was two pieces of legislation that had to be passed together to give the president the fast track authority that he is seeking to move forward and negotiate the Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement, or the TPP. So we've got this. We've got the TPA, the TPP, the TAA. A lot of alphabets, a lot of things in there. Pretty simple. TPP, obviously Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement, which the president wants to pass with FTA, Free Trade Authority, that he can only get through TPA, Trade Promotion Authority. You got it so far? So it's nuts, but this is how it would happen. Today on the Trade Promotion Authority, which is the fast track authority giving the president to do this, it passed 219 to 211. That part of it passed. Now understand, both pieces of legislation have to pass. If one does not, then it's done. It doesn't pass, because you can't change the two pieces of legislation that came from the Senate without going back to the Senate and having conference and markup and doing all that stuff all over again. It has to be the same kind of thing. Where everyone is celebrating, like I am, in this whole arena saying fast track for right now is dead, is in the vote on the Trade Adjustment Assistance, the TAA. That went down 126 to 302. So you had the 302 folks in the House said, no, we don't want Medicare cuts and quote unquote savings of $700 million. We don't want to do that to pay for $450 million in trade adjustment assistance. Now understand, the $450 million in trade adjustment assistance for a trade deal as large as the TPP, for this, what they're saying is NAFTA on steroids, this massive program, and really, in my view, this massive job killer, is as a pittance, because in 2011, when they reauthorized the TAA, the Trade Adjustment Assistance, they did it for $570 million off of NAFTA that was already more than 20 years old, almost 20 years old. So, one, the amount of money is woefully inadequate, and that's a part of the people who voted against it as well. So do I see at some point down the line where they go, well, we'll take the Medicare cuts out of it because we overreached and we'll put a couple of extra bucks into it? Do I see it then passing again, the 219 to 11, which to me is a huge vote, because this is really the litmus test of the people in Congress right now, in the House. 219 of them to 211. Those are the free traders. Those are the folks who are going, yep, that's what we want. Now, the 126 to 302, those are the folks who are looking at the trade adjustment assistance and saying it's inadequate, or there are cuts to Medicare, or for whatever reason they voted against that. So while everyone's celebrating the stop of fast track right now, it's based solely on this 126 to 302. That's the trade adjustment assistance. That's the money for when you lose your job, maybe we'll help you get training. Maybe, because, as the Department of Labor pointed out, I think only half of the people who officially lost their job under what is defined as jobs lost through trade, only half of them got anything out of it. That could be a bunch of reasons. People retired, people already found other jobs, whatever. But only half of the people who lost their jobs through the defined means actually were able to get the money for it. Now, the other part of this is, how many people are lost their jobs because of trade, and then how many were certified. And there are those who tell me that, it's less than 20% of the people who lost their jobs get certified. So we're talking about a smaller segment of people who even qualified for it because of the narrow parameters that they put in with this. And it's a whole bunch, which is why, again, I think the reason that the right wingers keep saying, well, it's a union payback, it's a union sweetener. You're damn right. Because those unions go and they fight for their members when they lose their jobs to get retrained, even when they're no longer members. And I got to tell you, this is another one of those reasons why everybody should be in a union. Because even when you lose your job, you got someone fighting for you. It's one of those things I don't think people say enough. But I hope that clears it up. That's what I wanted to make sure, that we get the alphabet soup all kind of rearranged and put into place, so folks go, oh, I get it now. The TPA, the Trade Promotion Authority, that's what passed. We should be concerned about that. But the TAA, that's what got shot down, which has gummed up the system at the moment. Trust me, there's a lot of arm twisting, a lot of backroom dealing, and a lot of going, how do we get around this? I'm sure as we speak, both with Boehner and Obama. And it's nice to see when they work together, isn't it? Especially when they're out to screw us. I got to tell you, frustrating. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Take you on, headstrong to take on anyone. I know that you are wrong. Headstrong, we're headstrong. Back off, I'll take you on. Headstrong to take on anyone. I know that you are wrong. If this is not where you belong, I won't give everything away.
I guess the question would be, if he shouldn't talk about it, should you?
So why not take the overwhelming majority of scientists at their word?
Major media steps up, challenges presidential candidate Rick Santorum on climate science denial. The world's largest economies put an expiration date on fossil fuels. Want to see how climate change will affect your grandkids? NASA has just the thing. Plus, secret donors gave $125 million to climate denial front groups in just 3 years.
Man, I would have been a climate denier had I known it paid off so well. All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I get it, Santorum. You thought the Pope was on your side, man. I know it must hurt when the man whose job is still steeped in medieval traditions is ahead of you on climate change.
Yep. This is your Green News Report.
Instead of telling the Pope to shut up, why don't you just start listening?
Okay, Desi Doyen, we now have word that this Santa Barbara oil spill about 3 weeks ago has so far cost $62 million to clean up, as it has sullied 97 miles of coastline, and there is no timetable for when the cleanup, if ever, will be complete.
Gee, I wonder how much a solar spill cost that day.
In any event, what do you got for us today, Des?
Well, first, climate change is now officially an actual thing in the 2016 presidential race. Republican presidential candidate and former Senator Rick Santorum was actually challenged about his recent remarks criticizing Pope.
He's challenged, all right.
Well, yeah, but he was challenged for criticizing Pope Francis over the Pope calling on Catholics to act on global warming and protect creation. Santorum said the Pope should leave science to the scientists. CNN's Jake Tapper challenged him.
So why not take the overwhelming majority of scientists at their word and take seriously that humans are contributing to climate change with potentially disastrous results?
Well, I would say this, that there are a lot of scientists who believe that. There's a lot of scientists who don't.
Not really.
And I think it's important that we we take very measured responses, and some of the responses that are being proposed actually do very, very little to combat the problem.
Which is actually also not true. But surprisingly, Santorum was even challenged in the belly of the climate change denial beast of Fox News. Here he is on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace.
You don't think the Pope has a right to talk about this?
The Pope can talk about whatever he wants to talk about. I'm just saying, what should the Pope use his moral authority for? And I would make the argument.
He would say he's protecting the earth.
I would say that that's an important thing to do, but I think there are more pressing problems confronting the earth than climate change.
Good luck with that, Rick.
Anyway,
yeah, and of course what he's really saying is that the more important things are protecting profits for the fossil fuel industry.
Yep.
But undeterred are the folks at the fossil fuel-funded Heartland Institute, which hosted its 10th annual conference promoting climate change denial in the nation's capital this week. Republican Senator James Inhofe of Oklahoma, who believes climate science is a hoax and a global conspiracy, received a special award for political leadership on climate change.
You mean the guy who said this?
The notion that man-made gases cause global warming is probably the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people.
Yep. And now we know that the Heartland Institute has received nearly $4 million since just 2011 to fund their climate change denial, and that was from secret donors. That's according to a new analysis of tax records by The Guardian, which finds that the network of think tanks and activist groups that spread disinformation about climate science have received more than $125 million in total in just the last 3 years. And that's from just two organizations called the Donors Trust and the Donors Capital Fund.
The Donors Trust is related to the Koch brothers, as I recall. And who is this other group?
Donors Capital Fund is also related to the Koch brothers.
Imagine that.
Meanwhile, a big move from the G7. The leaders of the world's 7 biggest economies have put an expiration date on fossil fuels. German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the US, UK, France, Italy, Japan, and Canada announced this week that they have agreed to decarbonize their economies during this century with a goal of achieving 0 carbon emissions by 2100. Now, that effectively declares the end of the fossil fuel era. It's only a declaration, but the G7 leaders say it will be part of a push for a strong UN climate treaty later this year. Finally, if you want to know how climate change will specifically impact your kids and grandkids and your town,
I do.
Now you can get really specific with a new climate impact tool released by NASA this week. It gets really, really detailed and lets you peer into the future from 2050 to 2100 to see the projected impacts in heat, drought, and rainfall for your town.
What a tool. For much more on that story and all of the others we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
There's only 3 things left now that I can do. Monday morning feels so bad. Everybody seems to agree. Coming Tuesday, I feel better. Even my old man looks good. This Wednesday's go so slow. Thursday, I don't know. I got Friday on my mind.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Yes, it is Friday, and Friday on my mind, and it is a good Friday. I'm thrilled about this. I mean, this victory with the TPP and the shooting down of Fast Track Authority, I think is a good thing. So it is a good day as far as I'm concerned. But it's not the end of it. We've got a long road ahead of us. But this will give us a great time to move right into our Future Friday and talk about what the future is and how we fight and continue to fight this, which is why I've asked Isaiah Poole. He's the online editor over at the Campaign for America's Future. Their great blog, ourfuture.org, the website. Isaiah, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
So I guess, you know, your group, one of those out on the front line fighting this a huge day for groups like yours and activists like your organization.
Absolutely. We used a tool that we actually developed in-house to drive several thousand calls to members of Congress over the last 2 weeks, urging them to vote no on Fast Track. And we got reports that at least we actually helped sway at least one vote. There may have been others against us. But we weren't alone. There were a number of other organizations that drove calls. I went up on the Hill and watched as 2 million signatures were delivered to members of Congress. That was as a result of petition drives that we and a number of other organizations did. So to borrow a phrase from Keith Ellison, the head of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, we made them feel the heat.
And the good thing, because I mean, when I look at the vote, it was right where I expected it to be on the TPA, on the Trade Promotion Authority. I thought 119 to 211 was probably where it was going to be, 218 to 212, somewhere there. But the vote on the TAA, that shocked me.
Yes, and it did. I think I don't want to give Nancy Pelosi. Well, let me put it this way: Nancy Pelosi had been holding back and had been more or less neutral until the very, very end. And then she gave a statement that sort of broke it all down. She talked about the overreach on the Republican side, where there were in addition to the Medicaid cut that was in the Trade Promotion Authority, that was going to be sort of the pay for the Trade Promotion Authority. Then on the customs bill, there was the sort of the trade enforcement piece. That was the third bill in this three-legged package that they're trying to move through. They added a prohibition against any sort of trade clauses in trade deals that would address climate change. They added a provision that would said that you couldn't use trade language to address immigration issues. And it was that kind of overreach. And I think particularly on the environment, I think was the piece that Pelosi was really angry about. Because how dare you try to decouple climate change from commerce?
But I thought, you know, in listening to the president's statements, you know, there were unprecedented labor and environmental regulations in this. This was supposed to be, you know, the thing that straightens out all of the things that were wrong with NAFTA.
Well, number one, we don't know that because we don't know what's in the language of the bill.
Okay, in his defense, I'll give you that.
Right. You know, and that's been the whole, you know, we've talked about this over and over and over again. I mean, that's been the problem from the very beginning, that this was a rubber stamp for something that we did not really know what, you know, we don't know what's in this thing. We know what's been leaked. And we know that what's been leaked has, you know, looks very detrimental to the interests of environmentalists and the interests of healthcare consumers and the interests of people concerned about corporate the imbalance of corporate power. So, and I think the lobbying that President Obama did on the Hill, I think it went, it was the kind of over-the-top pressure that really, I think, worked against him rather than for him in the end.
Yeah, because I look at this and I'm, you know, again, I'm looking at the two separate votes, and they're kind of, you know, kind of schizophrenic, if you will. until you break down what the 302 vote really was when you threw. And earlier in the program, I used kind of the story of my grandfather who said, if you're gonna break a law, only break one law at a time. Like if you're gonna run through a stop sign, go run through the stop sign, but don't run through the stop sign drunk, because you might be able to talk yourself out of one or the other, but not both at the same time. And this seemed to me to be a lot like that. We can screw you out of your job, and we can screw you out of Medicare, but we can't do both.
Yeah. And I think that there was this thought somehow that if they sort of broke this off, you could into 3 separate votes. You could do things that would buy Republicans, or you could get Republicans to swallow things that they otherwise wouldn't swallow, and you could get some Democrats to swallow some things that they otherwise did not want to swallow with regard to the TPA.
So in your opinion, where was this put through?
In my opinion, where this broke through or broke down?
Yes.
Well, I think I think a lot of the vote buying I think collapsed on itself. I mean, I think it was one of these too clever by half things. And number one, I think number two, the president's own lobbying. I mean, I think he just became a liability. I think his presence on the Hill was a definite liability, as well as Froman and sort of what became sort of this lampoonable sort of, this trade deal will cure everything sort of mentality,
right?
Which I just think didn't work. I don't think there was a real effort by the administration. Once you make the top line claim that this is best for the environment, this is best for workers, this is best for whomever, then you have to be able to prove it.
Right.
And they could not prove it. So now we're in a point where we can start asking the question, what does make sense as a trade policy? What does make sense as a process for doing this?
Do you think that's going to come out of this?
Well, we've done this differently before. I'm sure you've heard Lori Wallach, who's been one of the, great leaders on that.
Yeah, we've had her on the program a number of times.
Yes. And she will tell you that in the history of trade deals over the last 40 or 50 years, we know how to do this without fast track authority. And we know how to actually put, if you want to authorize a deal, you can actually authorize. This is what we want, and you can measure, what the administration does against, specific criteria that Congress set, and you can make Congress a real partner in the process. And we know how to do that, and we've done it successfully in the past, and there's no reason we couldn't do it successfully in the future.
So let me ask you this: now that we see where this is at, where do you see this going come Monday? Does Boehner try and bring up another vote on this? Do they try and push through what they had before they scrap it? Where do you see this going on the very short term?
Well, the overwhelming vote against this is against the trade assistance really means that you've got to do some sort of bipartisan deal to get enough votes to pass it. You're never going to get enough Republicans alone to pass trade adjustment assistance because they're fundamentally against it.
Correct.
So you're going to have to do something that wins Democrats. I'm not 100% sure what that is yet, or what the offer is going to be. But what I do think is necessary at this point, where we are all focused, is to say wherever the wherever the whatever you call that game where you take the mullet and you
whack-a-mole.
The whack-a-mole. Wherever the head of the whack-a-mole comes up next.
That's what we hit.
That's what you hit, exactly.
And that seems to be what this has turned into, a game of whack-a-mole. You're right.
Very much so. So I think what we're going to be doing is very closely watching what's going on behind the scenes. So we'll be talking to, the people who are privy to sort of the backroom dealing. Because what we really do want is not we don't want Fast Track to come back at us with an extra bell or an extra whistle.
Or the worst case scenario, one of the worst case scenarios, in my view, that the Fast Track passes without TAA, so the workers who do lose their jobs, they're the ones who end up getting, not just they lost their jobs, but they've got nothing to help them out either.
Well, I think that, what I saw in the vote pattern today was the emergence of that possibility. You have to absolutely guard against that.
And then does the president sign that?
Well, that is a good question. In any event, what you have is something that dramatically slows the train down, because the Senate passed bill does not, is dead. So there is something that's going to have to come out of the House that will then go back to that will have to go back to the Senate. Will have to go back to some sort of conference.
So then let me ask you the next line of questioning then, because if it doesn't pass now, it's got to go back through that whole process. How long until it's actually dead for Obama and it has to be picked up by the next administration? Because as you know, tomorrow Hillary's giving her big speech on I guess the big economy speech, a big campaign speech from the Roosevelt Four Freedoms Monument there in New York City. And I've been saying, that was fairly a calculated move. So you can say, well, TPP's behind us. Now we move forward. I'm curious your thought.
Well, this really does complicate her speech, because I'm sure she was thinking that this would be over one way or another by the time she made that speech. Now that it's not, there is additional pressure for her to say something. I don't know if she bows to that pressure or if she just continues to be silent on it.
She hasn't really said anything, has she?
No, she really hasn't. And, is now that the person she worked for has had this really kind of stunning defeat, really embarrassing actually. How does she respond to that? Or does she respond to that? I really don't know. Some of the indications from the kind of speech that she's planning to give, if the leaks are true, I'm expecting it to be a fairly underwhelming speech, actually.
Yeah, I'm with you. I because I think it's been built up to so much that it can only be, but you said a second ago this was an overwhelming defeat for the president. And I would have to think that the Mitch McConnells of the world, who, himself said, I hope he fails, have got to be thrilled.
Well, except that Donald wanted, McConnell wanted Fast Track. So
I know. I'm just, but it is. They wanted him to fail, and here he failed on something that he actually wanted.
Which certainly doesn't make him very good. So I'm sure there will be, the kind of recriminations about, well, Obama can't even make a ham sandwich correctly.
Well, I got to be honest, on this front, I'm happy to hear that.
Well, there you go. You're asking, what do we do next? And, the answer to that is to keep up the pressure. The good news is, in addition to the thinking that of people like Lori Wallach at Global Trade Watch and a lot of the organizations that have been doing the online mobilization, there are folks at the Congressional Progressive Caucus who put together a package of what a good trade deal would look like. What would a good trade policy look like? They have, a wonderful set of principles about how you could write a free trade deal that protects workers, that protects the environment, that puts a proper balance between corporate power and worker power.
Yep. Between labor and capital. And
Exactly.
that, to me, that should be the conversation that we have next.
Yeah.
That is just the one we should have been having all along, but it's where I think we have to go from here.
Absolutely. And the good news is that now we have an opportunity. Congresswoman Pelosi had said that we need to slow this train down. And the good news is that, in fact, it is slowed down.
Yep. And now I think the other part of that should begin, and I'm sure that will give us more stuff to talk about in the coming weeks and months, and more stuff for folks to organize around. And so I think this blows a breath of fresh air into a movement to get trade right. Not the same bad free trade schemes that have gotten us, I think, into a world of mass inequality and an uneven trade. I think this is a good opportunity.
Great opportunity. I was listening to the debate today, and you just listen to the stories that the Democrats who were fighting against fast track told about what was happening in their districts, the factories that had closed, the jobs that have been lost because of trade deals that were done in the past. And there were these disingenuous numbers that were thrown around on the Republican side, which, came, I don't know where those numbers came from. But the reality, well, I was going to say, the reality is that, we know that when the Korea Free Trade Deal, the Colombia Free Trade Deal that were signed by the Obama administration, we know trade deficits with those countries went up after those trade deals were signed. I mean, that's just fact. So,
no, you're absolutely right. And at the end of it, this is the kind of stuff we've got to continue to point out.
Right.
But Isaiah, I appreciate you taking time for us. I look forward to more coming out of the Our Future blog. Great stuff you guys are doing. And this, again, huge victory.
Huge victory. Congratulations to everyone who's been fighting for this, who made a call, signed a petition, carried a sign, did a march, did this. This is great.
There you go. Thanks so much, Isaiah Poole. We'll talk to you again.
All right.
Again, you can check out their website, ourfuture.org, for more information on this and all of the other great stuff they're doing. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but know they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Back to the Rick Smith Show. So, for this minute, we've been beating up on Obama all day. So let's do a little bit of good news for Obama. The Obama trade is down. The Obamacare, actually, people pretty happy. I just read the latest poll from the Commonwealth Fund. They're saying that 81% of folks are either somewhat satisfied or very satisfied with their Obamacare. Only 15% say they are not satisfied. And I got to be honest, this is the kind of stuff that you knew was going to happen. As people get their hands on it, as people make it their own, they're going to like it, and the Republicans are going to pay the price. And I said this all along, for the 40 million votes that they did to repeal it. Good luck taking it away from the 81% of the people who seem to be satisfied with what they're getting. Good luck on that one. Even the conservative YouTube phenom, Jimmy Joe Bob Webb, he said, "Don't you touch my God-fearing, gun-toting, gay-hating Medicare. Don't touch my health care." Yeah, there you go. So anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises.
For Workers Independent News, I'm Joanne Powers. In a big win for workers on Wednesday, the New York City Council voted to enact the Car Wash Accountability Act. The act seeks to address abuses that hurt consumers and the low-wage, mostly immigrant car wash workers. David Mertz, New York City director of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union.
You had workers working 60, 70 hours a week or more, wouldn't be getting paid overtime. Some of them wouldn't even be getting paid a legal minimum wage at all, working with harsh chemicals during the hottest days of the year, the coldest days of the year. Wage theft, a lot of them reported having their tips stolen.
In order to obtain a license, car wash owners must show they are meeting all applicable environmental and labor standards. The law also requires owners to obtain a surety bond.
We've had situations where workers won substantial wage theft judgments and then were never able to collect on those judgments. The owners just split. They shuffled corporation papers, were able to get away from actually being held responsible for paying those judgments. And the surety bond will make sure that that no longer can occur.
Will the Trans-Pacific Partnership be a trade deal or a raw deal? With the U.S. Congress expected to vote this Friday on fast-tracking the TPP, leading dissidents in Vietnam's underground labor movement want members of Congress to know that a TPP which leaves Vietnamese workers exploited is also bad for American workers. Until the Vietnamese government ends systematic labor rights violations, including unsafe working conditions, poverty wages, and widespread repression of labor activists, the workers are calling on the U.S. Congress to vote no. Democrats say the future of fast-track trade authority also hinges on a bill which would provide assistance to workers who lose their jobs as a result of the TPP. The House bill would fund this through tax enforcement, rather than cuts to Medicaid included in the Senate version. On Tuesday, the National Labor Relations Board sided with workers at the Terex Manufacturing Company in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. After painters at the plant voted overwhelmingly to unionize, the company started committing various violations to prevent assembly workers from doing the same. International Brotherhood of Boilermakers Industrial Sector Executive Director Tyler Brown.
Having captive audience meetings. The plant manager threatened to close the plant, said he had closed a lot of other union plants. Those are all violations of the National Labor Relations Act.
The NLRB issued a rare Gissel bargaining order requiring the company to negotiate with the Boilermakers Union as the workers' exclusive bargaining representative.
Basically, the board issues a Gissel bargaining order when they feel like the employer's unfair labor practices are so egregious, the results of having a fair rerun election just don't exist.
13 workers, almost a third of the unit, were also fired for organizing activities. The NLRB required Terex to reinstate the workers to their jobs, pay full back pay, and interest.
For many years now, labor law has been significantly tilted in favor of employers. It's kind of nice to see a government agency such as the National Labor Relations Board fighting for and seeking justice on behalf of these workers.
This newscast made possible in part through underwriting support from AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, and from the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
So I love this story out of Montana. Evidently, the Senate race there in Montana is getting interesting as one of the state's billionaires is deciding to throw his hat in the ring. One of the billionaire business people named Greg Giaforte is jumping in. And he had an interesting thing to say at a speech he gave at the Montana Bible College. And it's one of those things that makes me go, tell me what you really believe, okay? He said, quote, "There's nothing in the Bible that talks about retirement." He said, and yet it's been an accepted concept in our culture today. Nowhere does it say, well, he was a good man and a faithful servant, so he went to the beach. It doesn't say that anywhere, according to Greg Giaforte, the billionaire. He says, the example I think of is of Noah. How old was Noah when he built the ark? 600? He was like cashing Social Security checks. He wasn't hanging out. He was working. The billionaire says, so I think we have an obligation to work. The role we have in work may change over time, but the concept of retirement is not biblical. And I got to tell you, that's the new front in stealing pensions, I think, away from folks. That's going to be it. It's not in the Bible. No pension for you. Anyway, here to talk about what's going on here in Harrisburg. Given our Capitol report, I've asked Eric Epstein. He's a reporter over at Rock the Capitol, rockthecapital.com, the website. Eric, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, hey, I would point out to the Senate wannabe from Montana, and I'm, Old Testament, that the Bible is pretty clear about retirement, and it's also pretty clear that it mandates at least taking one day off a week for Shabbos and to observe the Shabbos. So, I'm always interested how people distort biblical and Christian scripture to their own needs. But the opposite side of retirement is toward death.
Well, that seems to be where they want to take us, isn't it?
Yeah.
You either saved enough money that you can retire, or you just die.
Well, one of the things that's interesting when people quote the Bible, the world's oldest man was Methuselah, and I think everybody's pretty aware that the Bible is a parable, and not to be not necessarily to be taken literally, but obviously this is something that is contrary to the rest of the world, where they're increasing time where people can go home when they have to go home to care for elderly, to care for sick, to care for non-ambulatory, paternal leave, maternal leave. We've got people running for office now that have absolutely no sense of reality or context.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing stuff to me, and scary on a whole bunch of new levels.
Right. Well, but look, what we need to get caught up on is that we're mid-June, and the budget is likely to get done. I don't know if on time, but I don't think over time. I don't think there's going to be really anything exotic about this budget. Pensions are going to be interesting only because Senate Bill 1, which came out of the Senate, is getting divvied up in the House. There's probably going to be movement from the House to the Senate that new employees will be on 401k.
Right.
That'll do nothing to address the current situation, and it'll be vetoed by the governor. I think you'll see, as we talked about before, some reform of the state stores. I don't see it being privatized, but I see that as kind of a deal with House Republican leadership. I think you'll see a severance. I don't know that it'll be 5%, frankly. And I think you're going to find that, education, although it was a cornerstone of the governor's campaign, I don't know that there's going to be as big a spike as he would have liked. So it's a first-year budget. My philosophy is a little different than the governor's. I think you do the heavy lifting at the beginning of the year and hope for political amnesia 4 years later. But it would be good to get the budget done on time. It would also be good to get a lot of the infrastructure and transportation projects up and cooking. I mean, the summer's prime time for that. So I think what we're seeing at the Capitol is basically a first-year governor trying to find his way. Some people have been kidding that there's actually three governors. That is Governor Wolf.
McGinty and Hanger.
Yeah, John Hanger and Katie McGinty. So, those relations need to improve between the governor, the Senate, and the House. And it's possible that it could. I don't see anything draconian. It would be good if we could move medical marijuana. I think most Pennsylvanians think that that's something that's important when we're dealing with children and seizures and glaucoma, et cetera. There may be movement on extending the retirement age for seniors, judges, that is. But I think that would require a constitutional convention. And, some of the stuff that was happening, to be honest with you, was not budget related. We had, if folks aren't aware, there was a decision in New Jersey on pensions that allowed the governor to abrogate a law he passed, Chris Christie.
Right, we talked about it the other day.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to impact Pennsylvania. It's a much different situation. In fact, in Illinois, the case went the other way a month ago. So I think Senate Bill 1 gets cut up, bifurcated, if not trifurcated, and I don't see much, if anything, happening on pension. I think the governor would prefer pension obligation bonds. So, as much as that was ballyhooed as a big issue, I just think it goes out with a whimper. I also think that Jay Corman and Scott Wagner are running for governor.
Yep.
And I think Senate Bill 1 is a cynical ploy.
Wow, because I've been hearing that there's a potential that they hand the Corbett budget to Wolf with all the gimmicks and the gamesmanship and all the one-time this and that to see if he'd be willing to sign that.
I think you're going to see. Look, here's the deal. At the end of the day, I don't think the budget is going to be anything what the governor wants it to look like or what either house wants it to look like. I think the governor has surrounded himself with people that are Rendelian. And that although I think he's a real decent, nice guy, I think the budget is probably going to look more like something out of the Corbett era than out of the era we thought we were going to get. So that, at some point he's going to have to step up. And,
Do you really think that? Do you think that you're going to see the kind of massive social spending and the massive cuts to Medicaid and to programs for the poor and for education?
No, I think you'll see more of a status quo. And look, Governor Wolf has done a lot of good, since he's come in, when you deal with those issues. When I say a budget that looks somewhat like Corbett, I think you may see one-time fixes to get the budget through in order to balance it. I don't see any revenue enhancements coming in that the governor would like to see to help fund property tax relief, to help fund public education. I mean, these are things I support as well. So when I say Corbett, I don't mean Corbett in the sense of cutting social services. I mean Corbett in the sense of having to find one-time fixes to get the budget through this year. So
you're going to be looking for the seat cushions. And I look at this because, to me, you're right. I'm with you on the you get this stuff done out early in your term, so maybe people forget, which is why I think it was probably smart to come out with the tax increases, the increase on sales tax and personal income tax now instead of a year or two from now.
Yeah, no, I agree. The budget was bold. I mean, the Wolf administration deserves a lot of credit. It was well thought out. It was bold. It's a lot of heavy lifting to do 3 different taxes: Marcellus sales, severance, sales tax, and personal income tax. I think you probably got to decide which one you want. The Marcellus shale is probably the one that gets through. So he deserves credit for that. He also deserves credit because he's reversed the tide when it comes to cutting social services and public education. So my qualm isn't what his priorities are, because I'm in sync with his priorities. My qualm is I think we have a structural debt and a structural deficit that we haven't addressed. And he, I think, tried to do it with the sales tax and the property tax. And let's be honest. And if you're looking at states that did the heavy lift, like California and New York, they now have surpluses. California has been able to restore funding in a lot of areas, although there's tension between Jerry Brown and the legislature out there. And so, I think Governor Wolf's heart was in the right place, but this is just a state unlike any other. I mean, honest to God, it's,
yeah, no, I'm with you.
I think, that the Republicans would consider doing, and Democrats would, didn't see anything to be gained by moving on pension. I think the governor really wanted to get education funded at a more robust level. So yeah, it's a huge difference between him and Corbett in terms of the content and substance as what his priorities are. I just think we're back to, as you were saying, going through the cushions to figure out a way to get a balanced budget.
Yeah, I mean, to me, and where I said this budget that Wolf put out was the big boy budget, and even he himself has said, "Look, I'm not married to all of this stuff. This is my idea, and we can debate the ideas and go back and forth." Because I truly believe he doesn't see it in a political light, and that may be a problem with selling this stuff and getting this stuff through, is that he doesn't see it as political.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's probably more ambitious. I actually thought his property tax, in my mind, the property tax proposal he laid out there, I thought was very appealing because it would provide relief to people like me who are on school boards. And I think with the property tax relief comes our ability to put more money into the classroom. So, I'm not really sure. Here's the other thing, to be honest with you, I'm not sure the Republicans want to hand Governor Wolf a victory.
Of course not, because you got two of them right. You got Corman and Wagner, who obviously want to be governor next.
Yeah, but you have a problem for the Republicans because Tom Wolf is a very likable, decent guy, and I call him Teflon Tom. He's still very popular. I mean, that was just a gutsy budget. I don't care who you are or where you're at. When you're going after gas drillers and you're trying to provide property tax relief and increase public education, those are priorities that I think most of Pennsylvanians are in sync with. The problem is the legislature isn't most Pennsylvanians.
So when Mike Turzai is using talking points from the gas drilling industry during his press conference, actually holding their talking points in his hand, that's not very popular.
Well, I think, look, first of all, Mike Turzai is I think. Let me put it.
I stumped you. I got him. I got him.
Yeah. I think that Mike Turzai's priority. I mean, this is back to a guy who just really stepped on his own foot, when it came to voter ID. So I'm not really sure, how much credibility he has. As bizarre as it sounds, I think they made him speaker to get him out of the way so he wasn't majority leader. I think the issue for him, frankly, is liquor. But I think what we're seeing now is that you have a lot of ideologues in the House, and you're getting more ideologues in the Senate.
And that's scary.
So you're seeing a lot of theater and nothing substantive getting done. I think Mike Turzai is similar to a lot of legislators that get their playbook from Alec.
Yeah, it's bad stuff. One thing did happen this week that really kind of smacked at the governor. This Eric Arneson, I guess he's going to. The court has ruled that he has to get his job back as the overseer of the Office of Public Records, something with the right to know office.
Yeah. Well, there's two things that happened that are disappointing from my vantage point. I thought the governor made the correct decision in vetoing or rescinding the appointment made by Tom Corbett at the last minute. Although Mr. Arneson had a lot of experience in open records, he worked with Dominic Pileggi. He's clearly a partisan Republican. In fact, he probably should have done time in Bonusgate. If you remember, he was one of three folks in the Senate that received bonuses for working on campaigns, but was never tried. In fact, I think he got like $15,000 at the time to work for Senator Brightbill.
Wow.
So I love this when people can take a leave of absence. I mean, that just shows you how important they are for 6 months. He takes 6 months off, gets a $15,000 bonus, should have been prosecuted, wasn't, primarily because he was a Republican. And this is the same guy. Now, that case is appealed, so he is not going to be reinstated until that is appealed. So he will not be the head of Open Records, and that's something that's causing a lot of tension and probably helped feed the defeat of the state police appointment that Mr. Wolf was trying to make. So these guys are going to have to learn how to work things out, but Open Records is tremendously important, and it's a great tool, and I would prefer not to have it politicized. I think Mr. Arneson would probably do that, although he's a likable guy on a personal level.
Right.
The other thing that happened and people didn't really pay attention to is that Governor Wolf appointed a guy from the gas industry to the Public Utility Commission, Andrew Place, and that we didn't view as a positive development. So that may signal that he's willing to get engaged in more realpolitik. But he's replacing a Democrat. We were hoping for somebody a little more consumer conscious.
Interesting. Could that be the trade-off for what we're going to tax you more, and you get a little bit of say as a payoff?
That's what a lot of people think. Honestly, because the PUC would be the one I think that would have regulatory authority. So look, I'm not. Neither one of us are naive when it comes to these kind of deals. But I mean, the bigger deal is, at least in my mind, getting the budget done on time. And, we can quarrel because I'm critical of how the budget's being scrapped together. I think we should also feel relieved that we don't have Tom Corbett, that public education is not going to be slashed. In a lot of ways, we're getting more services since Governor Wolf has come, or essentially we're starting to reserve services to where they were. Sometimes, and I'm I'll be my own critic, is I think we're a lot better off just by the fact that we have an administration under Tom Wolf in place than Mr. Corbett, who was, let's face it, a train wreck.
Absolutely. So last question I've got for you. They're going to come back. Next week is kind of like a big week then, right?
Yeah, next week's a big week for three reasons. They've got to get the budget done by June 30th. So next week, stuff starts moving. So rubber hits the road next week. Next week is also, prime time for fundraisers for both Democrats and Republicans. $250 breakfast, golf, all that kind of stuff. And then, next week is, remember, these guys are in session almost all of June, and they run away in July. So, next week's the jumping off point. That's the time when everything comes to a head: fundraisers, lobbying, per diems, budget gets done. And remember, this budget's kind of interesting because we have a lot of offices that are open. We've had a number of folks that have resigned, take other positions, or were convicted. So it's not going to be a dull summer. When you come back in August, there's going to be some special elections.
Or we're convicted. I love that part of it.
Or we're convicted. There's nothing like breaking the law and having the taxpayer send you a dividend check every month, only in Pennsylvania.
There you go. Eric, always great talking with you, man.
I'll see you, man.
All righty, Eric Epstein, a reporter over at Rock the Capitol. You want to take a look at their stuff, rockthecapital.com, their website. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
It's kinda hard when everyone looks up to you. Try to make it look easy, gonna make it look good, like anybody would. I'm just your average, ordinary, everyday superhero, trying to save the world, but never really sure.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. In 1981, the Los Angeles Dodgers dropped the first two games of the World Series to their rivals, the New York Yankees. The Dodgers would come roaring back, sweeping the next 4 games, and so close the curtain on one of the strangest seasons in baseball history. The strangeness of the season began on this day in labor history. This was the first day of a strike that would last until August 9th. Nearly a third of all games were canceled. The reason for the strike was free agency. The players had won the right to become free agents a year after their contracts ended. Before this change, owners could renew players' contracts year after year, effectively stopping players from testing their market value with other teams. Determined to reverse the gains won by the players' union, owners brought in Roy Graby as a negotiator. Graby had a tough reputation for representing management for General Electric and for Pan American World Airlines. He took that same hard-nosed approach to the baseball bargaining table. The owners wanted the right to receive a player of comparable value for any player lost to free agency. This would effectively discourage teams from signing free agents if they had to give up another valuable player in return. The players' union understood this was a tactic to undermine free agency. Many also saw it as an attempt to break the players' union. Sports Illustrated magazine declared it the walkout owners provoked. Finally, the two sides agreed to a compromise that kept the practice of free agency intact. In a controversial decision, baseball owners decided to split the season into 2. The teams with the best records from each half of the strike-divided season went to the playoffs. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney
Last time we talked of the lost hope of finding the easy water route to the Pacific that Thomas Jefferson had always thought existed. But as often happens, while searching and exploring for one thing, another is found. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark did not turn back when they couldn't find the expected route to the west. Instead, they turned to their American Indian friends. With the help of a Shoshone woman named Sacagawea, they discovered and documented the Great Northwest. By November of 1805, almost 2 years into the trip, Lewis and Clark had a real feel of the richness and enormity of the North American continent. In the 1950s, Bernard DeVoto edited their journals, and he wrote, "It was the first report on the West. It satisfied desire, and it created desire, the desire of a westering nation. And when thinking of Lewis and Clark, don't forget Thomas Jefferson, their friend that stirred up the adventure." This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Where I come from isn't all that great. My automobile is a piece of crap. My fashion sense is a little whack, and my friends are just as screwy as me. I didn't go to boarding schools. Preppy girls never looked at me. Why should they? I ain't nobody, got nothing in my pocket. Beverly Hills.
Interesting development last Friday. Real interesting development, in that it appears that the Iowa caucus, the straw poll that they used to do, no more. Evidently, they've been doing these straw polls since 1979. Dead. Evidently, the GOP chairman in the Hawkeye state, they held a vote on if they were going to do it, and the 16-member group unanimously decided that the straw poll that they were going to have on August the 8th would be canceled. So no more straw polling, no more rigging the game, no more Michelle Bachmann. And the thing is look, there are a lot of people who say, these straw polls are a waste of time. A lot of people say, no good straw poll. Some people say, it props up the lesser known candidates, give people a shot. I think Michelle Bachmann, who won the straw poll, I think last time around, there are some folks who said that she kind of bought it, but okay, you got what you got. It is what it is.
They're preventing the crazy.
Well,
trying to keep a leash on it.
I'm not in favor of. I want to see the straw poll.
What's a straw poll again? They just put people, just a poll.
Yeah, it's just a poll where people choose who they want.
Okay.
So you go in, you pack your, like Michelle Bachmann did. She got all of her people there. They packed the polls, and it's called voting. But
this is straws. This is a good development for Rick Santorum, that's for sure.
No, I mean, given his one person that showed up. Crazy. All righty. Scott Walker. How many is Scott Walker in yet? Has he decided that he's going to run for president? Has he officially announced? Because it's interesting that he's running around saying that his vice president might be Marco Rubio, which I don't know how a guy who's not even in the race yet. I guess I do know. My running mate will be, I need a billionaire, wouldn't I? Let me get Warren Buffett. He'll be my VP.
Well, Tom Steyer is out there.
Steyer, yeah, I guess that too. Yeah. So I need a billionaire. But anyway, he's saying that Rubio is could be his guy, because he's listening to folks about who his vice president is going to be. A guy who hasn't even announced he's going to run yet.
Yeah, and I was reading the other day that Christie might actually be running, but I thought he was out too, or he hasn't.
I thought Christie announced he was out.
I thought he announced he was out. and now he might be back in. People
kind of like Lindsey Graham. He's out. He's in. I don't know. No, he's not out. But here's the thing. Lindsey had there was an interesting article written about Lindsey Graham the other day that caught my attention. Because he's now pushing back. If you didn't hear the story, the senator from Illinois, this Ron Kirk, didn't realize that the mic was open. And that happens to me sometimes here at the program. I'll leave the mic on and I'll be talking about something I probably shouldn't be. And people will go, hey, the mic's on. And look, I stand by anything I say. So if you heard something while the mic was on, I stand by it. But this Kirk, the Senator Kirk, said I think something along the what was it? The bro without a hoe or something?
Yeah.
He can't go farming. I don't know.
But I hear rumor has it might be Rick Santorum with many different wigs.
See, there you go. That's not nice. Because as he was being interviewed by Bloomberg, this is Lindsey Graham. He said, I just never had time for it. It wasn't something that came up. And when you go back and you look at this guy's story, and I respect this guy, I respect his story, I respect him, but at the end of it, I don't like his policies. His parents died. He took care of his sister. He was in the service. Did a whole bunch of stuff. And his job, his early life, where most people are being married and having children, was taking care of his sister and all of that stuff. And it probably it didn't come around. Is he gay? I don't care. I don't.
Well, the Republicans would.
And they would. But more importantly, he came out and he said, look, there's nothing in the Constitution that says I have to be married. There's nothing in the law that says that the politician has to be someone who's married. And I said, as I'm thinking about it, and this is one of those moments where, he's right. I don't care whether he's married or not. Doesn't matter to me at all. Even if John McCain did say that, he loves Lindsey more than any woman ever could or anyone else could, but you take that where you want to go with it. I think that the people that he's attempting to sway over to vote for him, those are the folks who do care. If he's married, they do care. If it's almost, if he were single, it would be worse. It would be worse if he was gay. So I mean, it's just one of those weird things that's going to be interesting to watch over the next several weeks and months. Anyway, let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I guess the question would be, if he shouldn't talk about it, should you?
So why not take the overwhelming majority of scientists at their word?
Major media steps up, challenges presidential candidate Rick Santorum on climate science denial. The world's largest economies put an expiration date on fossil fuels. Want to see how climate change will affect your grandkids? NASA has just the thing. Plus, secret donors gave $125 million to climate denial front groups in just 3 years.
Man, I would have been a climate denier had I known it paid off so well. All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I get it, Santorum. You thought the Pope was on your side, man. I know it must hurt when the man whose job is still steeped in medieval traditions is ahead of you on climate change.
Yep, this is your Green News Report.
Instead of telling the Pope to shut up, why don't you just start listening?
Okay, Desi Doyen, we now have word that this Santa Barbara oil spill about 3 weeks ago has so far cost $62 million to clean up, as it has sullied 97 miles of coastline, and there is no timetable for when the cleanup, if ever, will be complete.
Gee, I wonder how much a solar spill cost that day.
In any event, what do you got for us today, Des?
Well, first, climate change is now officially an actual thing in the 2016 presidential race. Republican presidential candidate and former Senator Rick Santorum was actually challenged about his recent remarks criticizing
Oh,
Pope.
he's challenged, all right.
Well, yeah, but he was challenged for criticizing Pope Francis over the Pope calling on Catholics to act on global warming and protect creation. Santorum said the Pope should leave science to the scientists. CNN's Jake Tapper challenged him.
So why not take the overwhelming majority of scientists at their word and take seriously that humans are contributing to climate change with potentially disastrous results?
Well, I would say this, that there are a lot of scientists who believe that. There's a lot of scientists who don't.
Not really.
And I think it's important that we take very measured responses. And some of the responses that are being proposed actually do very, very little to combat the problem.
Which is actually also not true. But surprisingly, Santorum was even challenged in the belly of the climate change denial beast of Fox News. Here he is on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace.
You don't think the Pope has a right to talk about this?
Pope can talk about whatever he wants to talk about. I'm just saying, what should the Pope use his moral authority for? And I would make the
Well, he
argument.
would say he's protecting the earth.
I would say that that's an important thing to do, but I think there are more pressing problems confronting the earth than climate change.
Good luck with that, Rick.
Yeah, and of course what he's really saying is that the more important things are protecting profits for the fossil fuel industry.
Yep.
But undeterred are the folks at the fossil fuel-funded Heartland Institute, which hosted its 10th annual conference promoting climate change denial in the nation's capital this week. Republican Senator James Inhofe of Oklahoma, who believes climate science is a hoax and a global conspiracy, received a special award for political leadership on climate change.
You mean the guy who said this?
The notion that man-made gases cause global warming is probably the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people.
Yep. And now we know that the Heartland Institute has received nearly $4 million since just 2011 to fund their climate change denial, and that was from secret donors. That's according to a new analysis of tax records by The Guardian, which finds that the network of think tanks and activist groups that spread disinformation about climate science have received more than $125 million in total in just the last 3 years. And that's from just two organizations called the Donors Trust and the Donors Capital Fund.
The Donors Trust is related to the Koch brothers,
Yep.
as I recall. And who is this other group?
Donors Capital Fund is also related to the Koch brothers.
Imagine that.
Meanwhile, a big move from the G7. The leaders of the world's 7 biggest economies have put an expiration date on fossil fuels. German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the US, UK, France, Italy, Japan, and Canada announced this week that they have agreed to decarbonize their economies during this century with a goal of achieving zero carbon emissions by 2100. Now, that effectively declares the end of the fossil fuel era. It's only a declaration, but the G7 leaders say it will be part of a push for a strong UN climate treaty later this year. Finally, if you want to know how climate change will specifically impact your kids and grandkids and your town,
I do.
Now you can get really specific with a new climate impact tool released by NASA this week. It gets really, really detailed and lets you peer into the future from 2050 to 2100 to see the projected impacts in heat, drought, and rainfall for your town.
What a tool. For much more on that story and all of the others we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
There's only 3 things left now that I can do.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Representative Elijah Cummings had an op-ed today in the Washington Post. For those people who are thrilled to hear more about Benghazi, Benghazi, when that seems to be the only thing that you're going to hear about, even though I tend to forget that there's still an investigation going on. As slow as this has been moving, it tells me that they're unturning everything again and again and again. In fact, over looking under the same rock like 70 times, hoping something else will appear or someone will put something there. But according to Cummings, this whole process probably going to cost more than $6 million that we're going to squander on this. He says that he says for those keeping track, the committee has already spent more than a year of time and more than $3 million trying to find evidence to damage Hillary Clinton and her presidential campaign, even as it continues to come up empty-handed. And you look at this and you talk about $6.5 million, $6 million. I think we could probably spend that on something a little bit better than Trey Gowdy on a witch hunt. Just a thought. Maybe Lindsey Graham looking for a rotating first lady. I don't know. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. and also in New York at the UN. Luke Vargas, Talk Radio News Service. Luke, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, you bet.
So what do you think of this? Another couple $1 million investigating Benghazi?
Look, I think you may have said it correctly, which is that they may be looking in the same place twice now in order to find something really incriminating here. I think, from my view, the biggest thing that this Benghazi investigation has unearthed in some parts are damaging stuff about Hillary that is going to be tough for Hillary to explain in the election regarding her own emails. But again, I have not been really hot on the trail of the Benghazi attack over the last few years, and I'm not sure there's much that'll change that.
Yeah. I know Hillary's going to give her big speech tomorrow at the FDR Memorial there in New York City, the Four Freedoms Memorial. Any thoughts on what we may hear? Because I got to tell you, with the shooting down of the Fast Track Authority, there's some timing there that's kind of interesting that she would give it on the Saturday after the TPP vote. Just seemed kind of interesting to me.
Well, this has been planned for a while, so I doubt, and this vote on the trade was sort of scheduled this week. So I don't think it's sort of just interesting timing, but not strategic. But it does reflect maybe good thinking on the part of Hillary Clinton to have been rather non-committal on this up until now. Now she can really, gauge the landscape in Washington and weigh in accordingly. It's not how we like our politicians to operate, but that's how they like to operate, and her luck sort of came through here. I will be at this rally. I can actually see the park that she's going to be holding the rally in from where I'm sitting right now, because this is just in the water in the East River outside of the United Nations. So I have plans to go there tomorrow. Kind of funny, I called the Hillary Clinton headquarters about an hour ago to talk to someone in their press office, and they put me on hold, and I could hear them talking in the office. Do we have a phone number for the press office? And they got back and said, oh, sorry, we don't have a press office. I said, oh, okay. Do you have an email? They said, you should go to hillaryclinton.com and under press. I went to hillaryclinton.com, went to the press page, completely empty, just has a link, share this page on Facebook. So I guess making outreach easy for the media is far from priority number one for this campaign, confirming these suspicions we've had for quite some time, which is a shame because I actually really enjoyed working with the Clinton press team back in 2008, but they're making life a little bit more difficult for us this time around.
Maybe they just didn't think about it. Maybe they had the same people who worked on the Obamacare website to develop theirs.
Well, at least it could say, how hard is it to say under construction? It was just an empty page, which was making me think maybe my ad blocker is blocking what's on this page. Anyways, not what I was expecting from what is going to be $1 billion campaign.
Yeah, well, let's talk about what's going on today. The big trade authority vote, the Trade Promotion Authority passed through 219 to 211. It was the TAA portion of it that got snagged up 126 to 302, basically killing for now the Fast Track Authority for the TPP. Anything else that we should know about?
Well, we're hearing from the White House that they want to try and get another vote on this in the next few days. They have been pointing out that the Senate actually rejected many of these same proposals before passing them in the end. So I guess that's the hope at the White House, that cooler heads will prevail or something like that. I thought it was interesting that Nancy Pelosi spoke before this vote, sort of guarding her hand on this issue until the very last minute. It looks like one of the things she's been saying that she wants to see other legislation pushed through the the Congress before she's going to change her mind on the TAA and then the TPP more broadly. Among those bills that she wants is a highway bill. She wants more action on climate change. And I'm sort of sympathetic to this. I mean, I like the idea that there are some ways of achieving multiple policy aims with one stroke of a pen, but, and I'm maybe guessing you share this view, the TPP is worrisome in many ways because it circumvents Congress. And I think the argument from Minority Leader Pelosi here is that essentially, look, you need to respect this institution to the White House. If you and to the leaders in the Senate as well. If you want to use the Congress to accomplish your goals, you should rely on us for all these different issues. You should take action on a wide range of policy measures instead of just coming to us and demanding a vote here. So her indication was if we get a highway bill through, maybe I'll change my mind, but that's not something that's going to change overnight. The White House still saying they want to see another vote on this in the coming days. I don't think a lot of Democrats are going to change their minds. They got a visit personally from the president this morning on Capitol Hill, and the caucus did not in any way look like it followed his recommendation. There were so few Democrats that ended up voting for TAA. So he's going to need to really tip the scales here. I'm not sure what trick he's got that he hasn't already played.
Now, I'd like to be able to do some of the polling on this to find out where the people who voted against it fell. Was it against, was it, as I would assume many of the Republicans are just against the idea of trade adjustment assistance and, the harsh sword of the economy. If it cuts out your heart, so be it. And how many people voted because the Medicare cuts that were tied to paying for the trade adjustment assistance. I would be interested to see where people fell down on that, but you're not going to know, but it'd be interesting to find out.
No, I'm with you. I would love to drill down into this. It seems a little bit too easy to just write this off as a partisan split. But again, that's probably a huge part of it also. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see what happens and what arm twisting comes in the next several days. Let's move on to Iowa, as we talked about in the last segment. The straw poll gone, I guess, huh?
Look, I've covered this event twice through the years, as well as the caucus. I think the rationale here is pretty clear. We're hearing one thing from the Iowa Republican Party, which is this is just about low turnout. You had apparently Mike Huckabee and Lindsey Graham and Jeb Bush saying they didn't really want to campaign for the straw poll anymore. Looking at the last two winners, Mitt Romney in 2008, in a year when Huckabee ended up winning the caucus, and Michelle Bachmann back in 2012 when Rick Santorum ended up winning the caucus, it's pretty clear this event is not really a good representative sample of how strong you are as a candidate in Iowa. Interesting that the planned date for this year, August 8th, is just 2 days after the first GOP debate that's going to be hosted in Ohio by Fox News. So it's my guess that the thinking here was driven by party leaders who likely said, look, we need to make sure we are not giving a lot of extra airtime and attention to candidates who haven't really earned it. Let's use a debate to see who floats to the top, not some meaningless straw poll. So again, they have one reason, but this is just sort of because of conversations from the candidates. If this event had gone forward, I'm sure Jeb Bush, Lindsey Graham, and Mike Huckabee would have campaigned or dedicated at least some attention to it. But much more likely, I think that they want to, find a better way than these, bussing people in for some chili dogs to determine who's a good candidate. And maybe a debate is a better way of doing that.
Yeah, I still like the bussing people in for chili dogs. I tend to like the straw poll. I like the down home folksiness of it.
Look, I don't think this means that the Iowa State Fair is not going to be a great place to get your photo taken, chomping into a big hot dog, which is sort of the photographic gold that all of us journalists like to capture during the campaign. But it's a major element of it. So this is sort of a changing of the tradition. And with the primary dates and caucus dates moving back too, it really is a very different year for the election cycle.
I still like the people having to eat fried butter.
Yes. The deep fried Twinkies too.
That I understand to a degree, but fried butter, I don't know, just not going there. Anyway, let's move on. Solar power, evidently a new report saying that we've hit a big global milestone.
It doesn't sound that big, but it's pretty important to those who I've spoken to in the industry. Solar power through photovoltaics now represents 1% of the global energy mixture. If you break this down sort of in a visual sense, this is equivalent to 66 of your average sized coal-fired power plants. So again, that's a hard image for me to actually work with. I spent some time calculating it, and I thought it would be maybe perhaps more enlightening than it ends up being. But coal power plants are, they produce a heck of a lot of energy. So this is actually quite a lot. And when there are a number of renewable energy sources all competing to increase their share of the market, to even get to 1% is meaningful. This industry says by 2050, the goal is for solar to represent about 21% of the global energy mixture. That would be a tremendous breakthrough if that kind of adoption can actually be realized. Again, a nice milestone, and the folks I talked to in the industry today are really upbeat about this.
Yeah, well, at the Smith household, we produce about 40% of our electricity thanks to solar power. So that's a nice thing. I'm well above the global average.
There you go. I mean, if someone had asked me to guess before hearing this story what the percentage was, I guess I would have assumed it was higher than 1% already, because we hear about countries where solar has really taken off. But again, those are a vast minority of countries. They are obviously being used as inspiration for others, but it's just going to take a long time to really see those numbers change around the world. But 1% is a great place to begin.
Yeah, I mean, if we were really serious about solar, the entire state of New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, most of Texas, they would be just completely covered with solar panels.
Yeah, I know. It does seem like in the U.S., at least, it's going to be individual businesses and homeowners who are championing that kind of adoption. There are plans through the BLM to use government lands to put solar installations. It's been seeing it actually sort of happen in Massachusetts slowly, my home state. But
the state that's covered by snow a good portion of the year.
I know, maybe not where the concerted state effort needs to be, but
no, I mean, I have a friend.
Hopefully, if it works there, the math can be scaled up and improved elsewhere.
We have a relative who works in Las Vegas, and she's pretty high up in the government structure there, and she said one of the things that they had wanted to do was in the parking lot to cover the parking lot with solar panels. Makes perfect sense. No point in wasting all of that sun. And they just said, nope, too expensive. Not going to do it. Not going to make that kind of investment. They talked about putting walkways down the streets that were solar panels instead of just tin. And nope, not going to do it. Too expensive. And you go, duh. Think about 20 years from now. Right. Just is what it is. Let's move on. Zimbabwe ditching its currency. I guess wheelbarrows full of their currency was too hard to kind of buy bread with.
Oh, you bet. Zimbabwe has always been the sort of the case study of how to really screw up your currency. They were printing money for decades just to get by, to pay government salaries, to fund these sort of overseas military expeditions. This reached a head in 2008 when there was 80% unemployment in Zimbabwe, and the inflation rate was in the trillions of percent. It's just hard to comprehend how bad things were. They stopped printing that currency in 2009, and the US dollar and the South African rand became sort of the de facto currency, as the Zimbabwean dollar really became something of a collector's item. I think the highest note that was offered in the Zimbabwean dollar was 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollar note. It's just a fascinating thing to look at with all those zeros stacked on. So a long-awaited decision to actually become a multi-currency country has now been approved. There are going to be 8 foreign currencies that will be recognized in Zimbabwe as legal tender, and the government is offering, I think until September, any Zimbabwean citizens that still have those crazy old notes can cash them in and get this rate: 35 quadrillion Zimbabwean dollars for $1 US. A quadrillion is one with 15 zeros behind it. So again, if you need an example of how you can really screw things up and the time it takes to begin to unravel that system, Zimbabwe is the place to look.
I don't even want to begin to think about, taking like $100 over there and trying to figure out what the exchange rate is on whatever the number you just threw out was.
Well, luckily, you won't have to, because your dollars will be an accepted currency beginning in September. So again, this is a way of eliminating what is obviously a headache that is causing many people to steer far clear of this country. I have been to all the surrounding countries of Zimbabwe and didn't go to Zimbabwe for political reasons, but also it was just so expensive. And so this is a country that really does have a lot of natural beauty and a lot of attractions that ought to make it a place that people want to go to. I think the thinking here is let's remove this totally absurd barrier to entry and maybe make it a little easier for foreigners to come here. I think it will pay off. The human rights situation hasn't improved. Mugabe is in his 90s and as bad as ever, but at least on the currency front, sort of resolving one of these long-standing crises.
All righty. And finally, Sunday. Sunday is Blood Donor Day, World Blood Donor Day on Sunday.
That's correct. At a time when blood donation rates around the world, particularly in developed countries, are really going down. This is sort of an existential crisis for this industry. In the U.S., at least, there is less of an issue with this because advanced medical technologies have reduced our reliance on blood transfusions during surgery. So there's actually less need for blood, but there are fewer donors. One thing that Sweden is doing to try and confront this decline, I think this is a really savvy approach, is when you donate blood, you give them your text or your cell phone number, and they text you sort of a thank you note when you leave the donation area. But then when your blood is used, when someone at a hospital, scans the barcode or whatever on your blood packet and it's used and given to someone, you receive another text that says that you've just saved someone's life. I think this is a great approach because here in New York, when I donate blood, I get a $5 Quiznos gift card. And I think it's every 60 days you can donate blood. That's not a really powerful incentive. I don't need that money. And most people who are donating blood are doing it for altruistic reasons. So I think this fits in really nicely with that. I'm on a lot of different marrow lists and other sorts of donation lists for organs and the like. And you never hear from them until there's I've never heard from any of them about marrow donations or the like. But sort of applying this to those other industries could be interesting. What if you received an email every year if you were on a donor registry for marrow that says, look, we cross-checked your marrow sample with 2,000 people looking for a donation. It didn't turn up this year, but better luck next year. Stay with us. I think that kind of engagement and represented with this text message scheme in Sweden is a really interesting approach. It doesn't cost very much money to set up these systems. And I really do think they target the emotions of people who are already willing willing to make this donation. So an interesting approach to stem a public policy problem.
There you go. Outstanding stuff. Luke, always great talk with you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks so much. Have a good weekend.
You too, man. Luke Vargas, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the top.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
The debilitating spread of inequality between the super-rich 1%ers and America's downwardly mobile majority is of huge economic, political, and cultural significance to our country. So why is it largely ignored by the television media? Meet David Zaslav, CEO of the Discovery Channel's cable TV empire. His salary last year was $3 million. But it was padded with an extra $6 million bonus, nearly $2 million in perks, and a neat $145 million in special stock gimmies. A total paycheck of $156 million. For one guy in 1 year. Zaslav is not just a 1%er, but a top 1,000th of the 1%ers. Les Moonves at CBS is up there too, wallowing in the $54 million he was paid in 2014. In fact, of the 10 most lavishly paid corporate chieftains last year, 6 are television barons, with Comcast, Disney, Time Warner, and Verizon joining the elite class. Someone should cast the whole bunch of them in a reality TV show called The Wealth Gap or Us. What genius do they have that warrants such extravagant pay? None. It's simply that they are lucky hirelings of an exclusive club of wealth that owns and controls most television conglomerates. The billionaire media tycoon Sumner Redstone, for example, owns nearly 80% of the voting stock of both CBS and Viacom. So $50 million for Moonves is not a stretch for him, nor can other shareholders stop his excess. Likewise, only 3 billionaires control Discovery, and $156 million for Zaslav is nothing to them. This is Jim Hightower saying, when so few people with such massive wealth control the media is not likely to turn its public spotlight on the malefactions of great wealth.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's populist take on what the powers that be are up to. Find out more at hightowerlowdown.org.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. The Rick Smith Show.
I think a good way to start the weekend off. Victory, my friends. The sweet smell of at least for the short term, victory on this Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement that is not going to go through by way of fast track, at least not today. It will be interesting to see what arm twisting, what sweeteners. It'll be interesting to see what comes out over the weekend and what kind of reporting comes out of D.C. As the president, and I'm sure John Boehner. It's nice to see them working in a bipartisan fashion, isn't it? Yeah, it's nice to see the leadership doing that. But again, this is huge news for me. I think it's a good step in the right direction of maybe hammering out an agreement that is about trade. That is about creating opportunities for folks, which nobody's against. Everybody I know who's against this, not against trade, against this kind. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Have a great weekend, and we will see you back here on Monday to begin the fight to stop it again.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide blood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA. We see the storm out on the horizon. The clouds grow dark in the midnight sky. We feel